Thank you for joining me and welcome to the Conservation Easements and Land Trusts presentation. Like Jen said, I work for Tug Hill Tomorrow Land Trust, which hopefully what I'll be presenting today will be relatable to you in your location, wherever that is. It's pretty easy to do. There are 90 land trusts in New York State, and we all do similar things. So hopefully what I'm going to be able to tell you about today is relatable. And you'll notice this logo in the bottom of my slide here is accredited. There is the Land Trust Alliance, which is a national organization accreditation that we belong to, and many, many others around the country belong to, holds us to certain standards. And so that's just kind of what we call, we would classify that as, us and other organizations maybe nearby to you, you would, work with somebody that's accredited, then you'll know the standards that you're going to be receiving as far as services go. So let's get started here. Again, appreciate you all coming. A little bit about Tug Hill Tomorrow Land Trust is we're a nonprofit. Most organizations similar to ours are. And we are regional in the Tug Hill region, which I'll kind of show you a little bit in a minute. So yeah, you can kind of see some of the details there, but the big one is the area of coverage for us is pretty substantial. We have our service area includes areas of Jefferson County, Lewis County, Oswego, and Oneida counties. So, and as well as into the St. Lawrence County, Western Herkimer County. So we really do cover a lot of area. I've got a map for everyone loves a map, a couple maps coming up. And, 2,100 square miles. And now, again, this is something that's hopefully going to be relatable to you in your region. But there are a number of, there's, 90, like I said, 90 some odd land trusts and conservation agencies that do similar things and provide similar conservation easement services and to around New York State. Ours just happens to be massive in size. So 21 square miles, 1.4 million acres that we cover. Now, doesn't mean we have them all conserved. I wish we did. But we work with entities, many public entities, many private landowners. That's primarily we're working with private landowners to help meet their conservation needs as well as protect areas around the Tug Hill region. It's the third largest contiguous forested area in New York State. We're proud of that. We're proud to attempt at protecting that, keeping it, that habitat for our wildlife, as well as for our residents here. You'll see in a minute our mission statement, but you will see we and other land trusts are massive proponents for working lands, especially working forest lands and working farmlands. So, you will find similar trends in your region with your local land trusts. As we don't want to just lock up development rights, but we want to see those lands continue to be improved upon, worked with in many different ways, and that is conservationally a benefit to the land and the people on it. So ancestral lands of the Onondaga, Oneida, and Mohawk nations. Beautiful, beautiful area. I love the pictures that we put in this slideshow. Here's a good picture of some working lands right here. So interestingly, the Tug Hill Plateau, rising out of Lake Ontario about 250 feet in elevation and goes to the top of the plateau around 2,000 feet on its eastern facing escarpment. So actually tomorrow, one of the field trips for this conference is headed to one of the lands that the land trust owns. We actually own the land, which there's some different models there of ownership that I'll explain to you that many land trusts employ in a bit. But we have, it's called the Keller Mohawk Hill Public Conservation Area. And that's where one of the field trips is going tomorrow morning, that I'm excited to be there and leading that group as well. So hopefully you'll be joining me on that. But that is on the eastern side of escarpment, which is pretty high up. It's got a beautiful view on top of the hill. And I always like to bring this up as far as the Tug Hill goes. What we're known for is really snow. Well, we're known for a few things, right? We've got the salmon, incredible salmon fishing out in Pulaski and all over the western side of the Tug Hill. We're known for our forests. We're known for incredible maple syrup production and farming, but also the snow. That's a big one. And we've just got an incredible, and this is a good map to kind of show where we are and how much snow we get. So a little background here. Oh, I mentioned some of this already, but over 1,200 nationally recognized land trusts, and our funding, being a nonprofit, comes from pretty much wherever we can get it, right? So we oftentimes will receive individual donations. We will apply for grants for ourselves as well as landowners. So we are that nonprofit bridge in many cases to provide and to be able to help our landowners in the region receive funding for whatever project we're working on. So I'll give you a couple examples. We're talking about conservation easements today in this presentation. That is one form to get that that funding through state agencies, federal agencies offering funding for conservation, and specifically conservation easement creation. We would work with the landowner, apply for those grants, hopefully receive them, and then work on providing and producing this easement, which we'll go into kind of the details of what that is in a little bit. But again, we're kind of that nonprofit bridge that are able to reach out to those funding sources. And of course, we offer many special events. We do education events. You know, there's a number of different ways that the land trust will employ to receive funding and to grow our network. And we've had a very successful few years since I've come on, and we've been able to move in a lot of different directions. That just since I've been able to observe it and see kind of how we are growing the staff. My position was a brand new one. So we are at 7 staff now, 2 part-time and 5 full-time. We have our office in downtown Watertown. So up here in the northern part of the Tug Hill. My position, they funded 3 years ago, and I'm actually down here in Oneida County in the northwest corner. So our region is so large that they ended up having me fill in the southern region of the Tug. And our organization has over 22,000 acres under conservation easement. That is private lands, so privately owned lands that have an easement on the lands after working with us in those many different ways, whether it was funded or donated to us. And almost 800 acres in lands that we own. And the one I mentioned earlier, Mohawk Hill, is the one in West Turin. This is our mission. Like I mentioned before, you know, we really promote the working lands, the forests and the farms, and appreciation of the region's natural and cultural heritage. And so everything that we do is focused on meeting that mission. So I work for the Land Protection Department. There's 3 of us. And, what we do, and this is where we dive into the easements a little bit deeper here for you, is we work with landowners and we try to establish, design, and implement conservation easements. So there's another good map of the Tug Hill region here. Believe it or not, our scope of of work has actually expanded past this, this boundary of the Tug Hill. But primarily, we're looking at and talking to landowners inside or nearby this map area. And the easements that we are designing are custom to the landowner. So many times a landowner will approach us, and this isn't just us, this is every land trust. Again, I'm trying to make this applicable to you in your region. Perhaps you're in another part of New York. I guarantee you there's a land trust nearby, within your coverage area. And private landowners have the ability to put this legally binding document and attach it, design it, create it, and attach it to their deeds, their property deeds. And this conservation easement, in most cases, and this is kind of how I usually explain it to folks, it's what it's doing is it's locking up your development rights and subdivision rights. There's other things in there, obviously, but those are the big ones that affect value. And so the conservation easements we are typically designing oftentimes, almost always, will prevent subdivision and prevent development on the property. So a landowner chooses to do these things for many different reasons. We won't get into all the hundreds of reasons people have for doing this. But just for you to know, to be able to, you are able to work with a land trust. Your constituents will be able to work with a land trust to do that. And they create this document that is legally binding and goes with the deed of the land forever. So many times it's forever. We work with conservation easements that are forever. So 20 landowners from now, this parcel will still have the same protections as that original landowner who set it up, because the land trust is there to protect those rights, those development rights, those subdivision rights. And what we're doing with a lot of this stuff is, this is one example of a grant project. Check the time. We've had 34 projects receive federal funding through the ACUB program, Army Compatible Use Buffer. Specifically, this was around the Fort Drum region. There was federal money to be able to protect within this buffer zone, and that money paid many landowners for those development rights, for those subdivision rights, and in the creation of the land, the conservation easement. So there's other programs out there. This was something that our nonprofit was able to receive and work with, and then hold the easement at the end of the project. Very successful project. We really enjoyed going through it. We look forward to future funding on this project. Specifically, this was focused on a lot of working farmlands around Fort Drum. So a hugely successful program. As you see, over 9,000 acres around Fort Drum, with a conservation easement by the end of those projects. And then there's other, like I mentioned, there's other funding sources as well. We have and work with a lot of partner organizations, Tug Hill Commission, who's hosting this today. We've got the DEC, of course, the DOT, pretty much everybody. We work with anybody that has a similar mission, that wants to do similar things, and that we can help. We exist, our entity, many land trusts, all land trusts exist to help. So we're helping landowners, we're helping other organizations. We attempt to locate funds, we attempt to educate conservation efforts, and we exist to help. So we have, and I keep coming back to it, but tomorrow's field trip up at Keller Mohawk Hill Public Conservation Area actually was a mitigation project with Ducks Unlimited that we ended up partnering with and receiving the fee land donated to us from Ducks Unlimited after they were done with their mitigation project. So many different ways of partnership. We are exploring a partnership right now with the Nature Conservancy in a planting project on another lands that we own in the town of Luray. So you can see we try to partner with and push forward our goals. Many of those things are inside of our strategic planning, as again, as you discuss and talk about possible partnerships and collaborations with your local land trust. Hopefully today is going to give you a few ideas of projects or ways to collaborate or ways to get involved with their conservation efforts and meet your goals as well, whether that's a private landowner interested in easement conservation or just getting out and volunteering and helping out in any which way you and your group can. So many different partnerships, many different efforts. All of the lands that we own in fee, we have a land management plan. That is a land trust alliance. I don't know what to call it. That's the standard, right? If a land trust owns land, we have a plan for it. We have strategy on it, and we will have certain efforts that we will be either promoting, implementing, and or monitoring. So, for instance, that planting in our town of Luray, Smith PCA, Public Conservation Area, there is the endangered bat habitat and population on the land that we own. So for instance, again, I'm just giving you an example. We're partnering hopefully with the Nature Conservancy for funding and grant writing to receive the support we need to be able to do a planting and or a fencing project to prevent deer browse, thus promoting tree regeneration in this one portion of the property where we would like to hopefully expand the habitat for the endangered bats. So just to give you an example of one of the many projects that we've got cooking right now. We identify the corridors for wildlife. So our connectivity project is a massive strategic driver for us. So as you might imagine, and as you'll come across in your own region and land trusts, there are a number of people requesting information from us, requesting possible partnerships, requesting possible lands and donations. We have to be a little strategic. We have a full-time staff of 5 and 2 part-time. And you'll find probably similar things across the region or across the Northeast with land trusts. We all have a capacity, so we have to be identifying strategic goals on how we can how we can move forward and promote those protections that we are interested in. And one being a wildlife corridors is a very strategic. That's what we use to look at whether this project is maybe higher priority in doing sooner than another. So that's just one other thing that we're involved with is this connectivity project as we move forward. Okay. This talks a little bit about that.
I'm
Jen?
sorry to interrupt you. Thank you, John. Thank you so much. I just want to let you know we're at 9:10 and our next presentation will start at 9:15. So I wanted to give folks a chance to ask any questions they might have, either by raising their hand or putting it in the chat.
Yes, thanks, Jen. Yes, please do. Yeah. I'm just going to flip through these slides as we wait for some questions to come in. Other things, outreach programs, education, field trips. We are involved in the classrooms. We're involved on our own lands. Again, everybody, if you have some questions about easements or anything, funding, how it relates to you, throw it in the chat for us, okay? Traverse Trail, another massive project, a volunteer effort that we have being built out around the Fish Creek area in the core area of the Tug Hill region. A couple fun challenges our land trust promotes, and you can earn a patch. So there's different ways to get involved, even if it's just recreating and learning about your local land trust. Of course, publications here that we have and that we've worked on and hand out many times, recreation guides, volunteer opportunities. There's a lot of those. If you've got time and you have the interest and you're close by, just contact me. We'll absolutely plug you into something that you're interested in, somewhere that you'll learn and help out the nonprofit as well. And that was the end anyways, Jen, so perfect timing.
Awesome. Perfect timing. Thank you very much, John. I appreciate that. Any questions for John?
Anything at all.
When you say the core of Tug Hill, what does that mean to you?
Yeah, the core of the Tug Hill. To me, it's a region within a region. And you can see it labeled right here. This is the area that's probably least populated with people. It is hugely covered by forests, and it is a major importance to water quality for the entire region. So it is a highly strategic area that that land trust really will focus on if there's opportunity.
Right, thank you. Because most of Tug Hill drains eventually to the Great Lakes, so we're very conscious of that. There's a question from John. What about, oops.
RCP, Regional Conservation Partnership, RCP. John, can you, what's the, forgive me, RCP? Very few roads through it. Yes, very few, Angie. Makes it nice, right? Nice and quiet. Can you share that graphic? Absolutely, Jess. Yeah. In fact, it's inside of our website. You might be able to more easily grab it from our Tug Hill Tomorrow Land Trust website. Long-term staffing needs for the land trust, given you acquire more and more easements. Yeah, Gabriel, great question. That is very much in the forefront of our minds as we continue to expand, as we continue to protect more acreage. There's going to be a capacity issue. And that's why I mentioned something about our strategy moving forward and assessing programs, assessing partnerships, assessing just projects. But yes, there's absolutely a need, and we are looking at different options in increasing our capacity. It's absolutely true. We've also adapted via technology. We're using a program called Lens in our monitoring. So as an accredited land trust, we are mandated to monitor every year, every acre that we protect through easement. And by doing that, we've often historically just been out and done it on foot and walked these thousands of acres. But we now are using some high definition aerial photography via satellite and many other ways that they capture this data and are able to free up some hours that way.
Well, thank you. I'd like everybody to, let's see, John, you're going to go to your booth, correct?
I will try.
And yeah, and then now we will pause for a second, and we are looking for Katherine Black and Charles Rorick to talk to us about protecting water quality. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Stop sharing. And just to clarify, Jen, that booth is through that the other program link. Okay.
Correct. Yep.
I'll work on getting in there. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you. Let's see.
Can you see my screen? It should still show the notes, but just want to make sure you can see. Okay.
You're going to put your video back on?
Yes, I just want to make sure I had that part working.
Sure do.
Oh, it's saying that I can't share my video because host has stopped it.
I know I was turning them off as people were joining. I shouldn't do that. Let me see. K Black asked to start video, and then is Charles joining as well?
Yeah, I'll throw my video on too.
Okay, great.
All right, you see it in presenter mode, right?
Yes, perfect.
Okay. Are we good? Everything?
Looks like we are great. I would like to welcome both Charles and Katherine to the conference. They're going to talk to us about using local land use authority to protect water quality. So take it away.
All right, good morning. I think my video is still blocked as well, Jennifer. There we go. Popping up. I'll give it another couple tries here, but I'll begin anyway. Like sure, I'll get my video to work here. But yeah, no, thank you for joining us for this quick presentation on using local land use authority to protect water quality. We'll go through a number of different programs today, and we'll try to kind of zip through a number of options, both through the Department of Health and Department of State to, yeah, look towards source water and other water quality protections. So we'll move ahead to the next slide. All right, and water quality as a whole, we'll get into some hydrological background as well as some programmatic background here to look into water quality, but I'll work quickly through a couple of environmental overview slides here just to set the stage for the number of programs that we'll be talking about. All right, so the hydrologic water cycle, this probably isn't, terribly new for a number of you. Just an image of where water flows, both atmospheric, surface, and subsurface. Water is continuously moving everywhere across our planet. Sometimes we can see it, sometimes we can't. And any impact to one of these elements of this cycle can impact the quality or availability of water somewhere else in this cycle, whether that's a changing climate or human anthropogenic impacts. Any number of things can impact this very robust water cycle that we have, both here in New York and all across the country and across the world. So the impact of water quality really is reliant on protection efforts at the local level. There are a lot of federal and state water quality protections in place to protect the health and well-being of people consuming water for recreation and for otherwise. And so water quality impacts a number of key components of life and living well. It impacts our drinking water, our recreation, and our community resilience, all the transportation needs, commerce needs that depend on clean and healthy water. To kind of set the stage as well, and again, this shouldn't be new for this conference or anyone here in New York. We just have such a robust amount of water and some beautiful water features. But of note here, just want to explain what a watershed is, in that it's an area of land that contains a common set of streams, rivers, drainage area that go into a single larger body of water. If you're on Cayuga Lake, for example, that's impacted by activities in Cortland County, all that drain into Cayuga Lake. And we are all part of the much larger Great Lakes Basin here in a lot of upstate, western, and northern New York. So a small activity on one piece of land can impact a lake far downstream, and all of these could feed into Lake Ontario that could impact source water quality on the St. Lawrence River, for example. So everything plays into a role, and so we often look at the watershed level to protect and engage in local, close-knit protection efforts. So for source water specifically, that's the source of drinking water. Drinking water across New York can come from a lot of different places: streams, lakes, reservoirs, rivers, and a lot of different wells and groundwater. Oh, my camera finally came on. Nice. Why do we protect source water? Source water is, again, key to a healthy lifestyle, and public water is extremely important to protect. Potential contaminants for source water can come from any number of contaminant sources. Landfills, agriculture are big ones, our transportation corridors like roadways with salt applications, and a lot of different residential features as well. Lawn, fertilizer applications, septic systems, common activities we all contribute to that can impact source water quality, whether you're in an aquifer recharge area or an overland potential contaminant that can flow into a river, a stream, a lake, all of which that can be sources of drinking water for communities. And there are a lot of ways that we can act to protect our source drinking water. Communities can take action by land conservation. We hear a lot from land trusts. It's a big means of protecting land for preventing contaminant sources. We can set zoning laws and regulations, educate the community. Educating the public is really one of our biggest keys to making sure you're aware of where your drinking water comes from and what can impact it. as well as restoring buffers along lakes and riparian corridors. A comprehensive, holistic set of protection actions can go a long way to protecting our drinking source water. We have a lot of different local and regional solutions. I'll be speaking on the DWSP2 program, the Drinking Water Source Protection Program, and Kate will speak on some of our other 9E plans and other local land use cases, but all of which involve this very collaborative and cooperative approach, making sure we include as many voices as possible for folks that may not be engaged in science, may not be engaged in, watershed regulations, but all play a role in having a stake in clean drinking water and clean water generally. So DWSP2, this is the program I work for. So I am the Central New York lead for the DWSP2 program. So I'm a technical assistant as part of the program. We rely on support from 4 different agencies, the DEC, Department of Health, Department of State, and Department of Agriculture and Markets to build our DWSP2 plans, drinking water source protection plans. What this program engages with, it's free technical assistance to any public water system in the state of New York, which is great. We extend through all of Western, Central, Northern, Southern Tier, all the way down to Long Island, with the goals of increasing funding opportunities for communities, protecting your water quality through a comprehensive source water protection plan with implementation strategies to prevent contamination, promoting local resiliency for climate change, flooding, drought, and strengthening community partnerships. We want communities that opt into this program to leave with a sense of collaboration and newfound connections with maybe communities, their neighbors, members of the public that they haven't engaged before. We want this to be a really, really engaging process. DWSP2 can help kind of through this rough timeline. You receive free technical assistance from someone like myself or any one of our partners that work as technical assistance providers for communities that opt in. We work on a flexible schedule. We typically try to meet with communities that opt in about once a month, understanding what their source water is, what threatens it, and what we can do to protect it through a variety of step-by-step implementation opportunities. We provide a complete inventory of potential contaminant sources for a community, whether you're on a lake or you're on several wells in a well field. We will map out your contribution area and find any potential contaminant source the community may want to look at. We provide a thorough list of source water protection actions, again, and guidance on funding, what you can achieve for grant applications with the state, with local grant providers, anywhere we can help hopefully find it. We will give a complete set of grant opportunities. And so we have over 15 technical assistance providers available free of charge. Well, we're hoping for next year to have another round of applications for this program come up. And you can see on the map of the right, the number of communities that we have opted into the program. It's really exciting that we have 100 communities accepted. At this point, I think millions of public water customers, members of the public drinking our water that are under some form of DWSP2 protection, which is amazing. We're hoping to fill out this map further with counties we may not have engaged yet. So we're really excited for what's to come for the DWSP2 program. And with that, yeah, I'll turn it over to Kate.
All right, so I'm going to just preface this that I'm going to go quickly over some watershed planning, and then I'm going to get into some land use solutions. And our local government office at Department of State has provided a lot, and I do not have enough time to get through them all. So I'm going to go through quickly. But Jen, are the presentations also available for people to access after?
The presentations are being recorded, and folks will have a chance to visit you in your booths if you go there in your gather link. So yes.
Okay, I'm just assuming that I will run out of time based on how long they're part of the presentation.
I'll stop you at about 9:35.
Okay, good. Okay. So the watershed planning is a partnership often between Department of State and Department of Environmental Conservation. No, it's not advancing. Okay. So watershed planning in general, as the name sounds, it looks at your entire watershed, and it is a collaborative planning and protection approach to address not only an individual water source in a given watershed, but all the land and water that drains to that source. It encourages communities to integrate water and land resource protection and restoration with growth management at the local and regional level, exploring conditions such as local land use practices and making recommendations on improvements that can be made locally and regionally. Well, obviously we want to encourage people to to make improvements at the local level, at your municipal level. A lot of these issues are better looked at a larger scale, and that partnership and collaboration is really important. So the Department of State funds two types of watershed management plans. One is one that's been around for a long time, just like I don't want to say generic, but a watershed management plan. And then more recently, in the last 6 or 7 years, I would say, the Department of State has started funding 9-element watershed management plans, which is a partnership and approval process that's joint with DEC. And for more information on those two types of plans, there'll be some links at the end, and then also feel free to ask me. Okay, so the DWSP2 and the drinking water or the watershed planning are programs, like I said, that take a holistic look at your water quality within your watershed. Both types of planning efforts encourage municipalities to examine local laws and taking a critical look at potential updates or additions. Now I'm going to move on to the plethora of local land use techniques that can be used to improve your water quality. So one thing I do want to say before I get too far into it, there is a resource on the website that's listed here. It's the Model Local Laws to Increase Resilience publication. So this is a really comprehensive list of example laws that have been in place and effective in other communities in New York State. It's primarily focused on resilience, but a lot of what we find is a lot of, like I would say traditional resilience practices have a big impact on water quality. They're aiming to get the same thing. So these can be a really useful tool to see not only examples, but also find out what communities have done them. You can always reach out. A lot of them are more than happy to talk about the positives and negatives of these. So I encourage everybody to take a look. Okay, so no adverse impact principle. This approach ensures that the actions of a municipality or property owner will not adversely impact the property and rights of others. Make sure that the actions taken in floodplains and throughout the watershed do not lead to adverse impacts on other property. An example could be somebody alters a stream on their property, making the water flow a lot quicker, causing erosion or other issues or flooding upstream or downstream. So that would be, in this case, they would be having an adverse impact on their neighbors. Comprehensive plans. The Department of State does have funding for comprehensive plan updates or creation. So New York enabling statutes of zoning require that the zoning laws be adopted in accordance with a comprehensive plan. So therefore, you really can't have zoning without a comp plan. So and a comprehensive plan can be thought of as like a blueprint for what other zoning and other land use decisions are made for your community, and also what your vision is for your community. There are objectives in the natural resources section of a comprehensive plan that can mimic a watershed management plan in promoting stream buffers, water quality monitoring, inspections, maintenance of on-site wastewater treatment systems. You can incorporate flood safety and water quality into the objectives of a comprehensive plan. And you can also reference a watershed management plan or a 9-element plan or a DWSP2 plan in your comp plan. Then we have critical environmental areas or CEAs. This is a designation used to highlight important environmental features. There are benefits and limitations. An example is the town of Pine Plains in Dutchess County designated a CEA to raise and formalize awareness of the importance of an ecosystem. It's a defining landmark and viewshed for the Pine Plains and contains sensitive steep slopes and protects drinking water supplies. Zoning. As I mentioned, the comprehensive plan, to have zoning, you need to have a comprehensive plan. So zoning regulates use, density, form, and siting of development. And zoning can be a really good tool to direct development where makes the most sense environmentally. So away from sensitive areas such as stream corridors and wetlands, and drinking water sources. Includes, you can use special use permits, overlay zones, and this is probably the most powerful land use tool to protect water quality. Subdivision. So the review process can ensure Practices are in place to protect water quality and quantity, such as individual wastewater treatment systems, stormwater management systems, subdivision review. And then you can encourage cluster subdivisions, which can be used to allow for more flexibility of design of residential subdivisions and concentrating development in more appropriate portions of the site. Again, away from more sensitive features. This is another realty subdivision, 553. It's the division of 5 or more residential lots with 5 acres or less within a 3-year period. That you can have this with or without zoning. And then this applicant also would need health department approvals to ensure safe water and sewage disposal. But this can also provide some additional protection. Cluster subdivision. This is an approach to encourage the dimensional requirements of the local zoning regulations to group structures or lots in a higher density while protecting larger swaths of land that can be used for recreation and lots of other features. I've seen some, where they have amazing hiking trails and providing a real resource to the community. And also recognizes that maybe not everybody wants large parcels to spend their Saturdays mowing. So this is one option to kind of still give people that sense of living, more rurally or with more open space without having it actually be their lot. Conservation subdivision. This is a type of subdivision or cluster subdivision that puts preservation first and states that at least 50% of a parcel is set aside for open space or parkland. Site plan review. This is a great tool, regulates the arrangement, layout, and design of a proposed use of a single parcel. Can be used to ensure new development, avoid sensitive areas like wetlands. Reviews elements must be listed in local site plan review law, otherwise they are unenforceable. So you can consider building location, road design, stormwater management, wastewater treatment. Special use permits, aka conditional uses. These are permitted by zoning, but subject to additional requirements to ensure that the proposed use is in harmony with the surroundings. So land use diversity while ensuring compatibility with adjacent uses. This runs with the land, not the landowner. The town of New Paltz has a steep slope development conditions for approval, such as soil stabilization measures. You can provide buffer areas and best management practices for control of non-point source pollution adjacent to stream corridors or wetlands. And you can also require that a percentage of land is left as open or green space. Overlay zoning. So this, you can protect a watershed by applying a common set of standards over underlying districts. So this doesn't necessarily have to follow your zoning districts. This is kind of like over top, and that increases the planning board's awareness of flood hazard or other concerns or risks in a certain area. So sometimes you see these like along a river or a buffer along a lake with just some additional protections in place.
Katherine, I'm so sorry to interrupt you. It's 9:35. We will be switching the presentation in about 5 minutes. So I just wanted to give folks a chance. If they had any questions, go ahead, put them in the chat or raise your hand. I'll let you keep going and stop you in about 5 minutes.
Yeah, I made it farther than I thought, so I'll still win.
So John Garfunkel has a question. Do you want to type it in the chat or do you want to, let's see if I can get you unmuted.
Hello. Hey,
we can hear you. Go ahead.
hello. Hi, thank you. Yeah, earlier in the year, I was reading up on the DEC document on overlay zones in use in New York and how effective they were in because I'm in Lower Hudson Valley area, so I was looking at ones in let's see, there's New Paltz, Warwick. We have some in Westchester. So I didn't know if you have that that picture. There we go.
I don't know if like immediately, but I live in Voorheesville, southwest of Albany, and we have one, and they blocked a gas station next to our drinking water, which is a source water in Voorheesville. But so I know that was effective, and
Okay.
they were sued by Stewarts. Not nothing bad against Stewarts. I know I'm in Stewarts country, but and they were the overlay district and the zoning and comp plan, everything held up, and it was they prevented that that development that was right next to a stream.
Thank you. All right, I can look at that. Yeah, but it's worth future discussion and try to understand what's out there and how they're working or forgotten or
Yeah, I think it definitely helped in for Voorheesville and my village was that the comp plan and zoning had been recently updated, so everything kind of meshed, you know, the purpose and goals of the comp plan and the zoning, everything went together really nicely. So I think that definitely helped them in that, you know, lawsuit that ensued after it was rejected.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Emma from Save the River has a question in the chat. Can you see them or should I read it for you?
Maybe I can. Oh, I just have to scroll down, I think.
Is
Yeah,
there
I
any
can read it too.
role?
Asking if there was any environmental nonprofits, the role that they could play within this, grants for water testing that could be shared between municipalities, other parties. I'd say there sometimes is. It's kind of, it depends on the type of testing you're looking to do. And there's organizations like, you know, NEIWPCC and others that sometimes have sort of funding and opportunities available. Yeah, it's great when you can have this kind of larger scale testing and monitoring take place. It certainly depends, but sometimes there are opportunities like that available.
Okay. Hearing nothing else, if you want to flip through real quick, we got about 2 minutes.
All right, open space protection. So you can set aside open space to be publicly or privately owned, can include recreation, parks, greenways, trail networks, cemeteries, forests and woodlands, wetland and stream corridors. It's a good way to have a municipality assess the importance of open space. It can also usually help with property values. You know, I think a lot of people really appreciate and love having access to those resources within their community. Wetland protection. So you can, you know, DC and the federal government does protect wetlands, but municipalities can enact stronger regulations if they have particularly important wetlands that they don't feel are adequately protected or would like protected even more. So you can use a number of resources and tools to do this, but you can actually create a wetlands law. Another really great tool is an intermunicipal agreement. So this is a joint planning effort to our municipalities, which can include counties to address common issues. One really successful one is Canandaigua Lake. They have an intermunicipal agreement. I think it's 14 municipalities that are involved, and they've been really successful not only at working collaboratively, but getting grant funds and getting a lot of projects done that to protect their water quality. So that's a really good one to look at. Cayuga Lake also has one that they've actually just redone and rewritten the bylaws for in the last few years. Oh, here's the example. I got ahead of myself. So I won't go into this one, but yes, they're very effective. They've been very successful with my grant program, the Department of State's environmental EPF local waterfront revitalization program. They've been very successful getting grant funding.
I am so sorry.
Nope, that was it. This is the last slide. I'm good.
Okay, finish for sure. Go ahead.
No, this is just going to be an example of a municipality that's been working with the DWSP2 program. So that's it. It was
Fantastic.
all the information is on the slide for this one.
Thank you so much, Katherine and Charles, for joining us today. They will be in their booth over on Gather. So thanks so much. And next we'll bring up Chris Zimmerman from the Nature Conservancy, who's going to talk to us about family forest carbon programs. Thank you. Let's see. How you doing, Chris? Thanks for coming.
Good. Well, thank you so much for the invitation to present today. I'm super happy to be with this group and looking forward to answering any of your questions.
Awesome.
Can you see my screen right now?
We can see your share. There's a couple of gray boxes over them, but maybe it'll go when you advance the slide.
Let's hope so. Yeah, I'm not
Let's-
sure, why that would be, but we'll see here as we get going. And so thanks again for inviting me to present today. My name is Chris Zimmerman. I work for the Nature Conservancy out of our Albany, New York office. I'm our forest restoration strategy lead. The Nature Conservancy is a global conservation organization that's focusing on conserving lands and waters that all life depends. Today, I'm going to really be focusing in on the Family Forest Carbon Program, which is really aimed at supporting New York State's family forest landowners. The program was developed by the Nature Conservancy and the American Forest Foundation. So as we kind of get into things, I just want to give you a general kind of sense of what we're going to be covering and talking about today. I want to first just give you a brief overview of what we call natural climate solutions. So how nature can play an important role in achieving our climate mitigation goals. And then really take a deeper dive into the Family Forest Carbon Program. I want to share a few new kind of pilot tree planting practices that we're working on, and then just share some concluding thoughts and then answer any questions. How are we doing with the screen? Is the gray box is gone, Jennifer?
It's still there, but I'm not sure if we have time to even troubleshoot it at this point. So yeah.
Okay, there we go. Maybe if I move that down there.
Well, that worked.
There we go.
And then
I
there's
think it
one on
was
the far right side of your photo, but yeah.
Yeah, I'm not sure exactly. Yeah, the banners. Zoom continues to amaze us, with new and new things and challenges.
Awesome. So Chris, your program goes to 10:05. I'll stop you around 10 to see if there's any questions and we'll finish up.
Great.
Okay.
So first, I just want to just give a brief overview of natural climate solutions. So while, certainly clean energy is really kind of the most important or vast majority of how we're going to achieve our climate mitigation goals to address climate change, nature has a really important role to play. So natural climate solutions are conservation activities that sequester and store carbon within our natural lands. So some examples might be, for instance, on our left-hand side, so protecting forests, so keeping forest as forest and avoiding conversion is a natural climate solution. Improving the way that we manage our forest over the long term is a natural climate solution and stores carbon in those areas, as well as like planting new forest and restoring forest sequesters carbon and stores it within those landscapes. And so that's what I'm going to be talking about today, how the programs that we are currently have in place and are designing can really be part of this nature-based solution towards addressing climate change. And so New York is really well suited to really address these natural climate solutions. Over 56% of the state is forested, and a vast majority of those forested lands are owned by family forest landowners. So in the map you see here to the right, within the dark green represents the family forest ownership, and in the peach color is approximately the state ownership. This is a map based on U.S. Forest Service data. And so these family forest landowners really play an important role in shaping the way that our forests are going to, the condition, the health of our forests within the future. And just a little bit about our New York family forest landowners. A really great resource in New York is the U.S. Forest Service's National Woodland Owner Survey, which surveys forest landowners throughout the state. And so this is basically information from forest landowners that own 10 acres and forest of above. There are approximately 187,000 ownerships, and they own approximately 9.2 million acres. And then these family owners in New York, these are mostly in smaller holdings. So approximately 100 to 200 acres in size is where a majority of those forests are held. These landowners currently aren't really seeking much advice from foresters or professionals to manage their property, only around 17%, and only 8% of them have a forest management plan, and a very small proportion of them participate in property tax programs such as 480A. Their biggest concerns are property taxes, forest health issues such as insect and diseases, and their primary reasons for owning forest land, according to the National Woodland Owner Survey, is really beauty, scenery, wildlife habitat is their main interests. So really programs to support these landowners are present, such as 480A, New York's tax program, USDA and the NRCS programs are available, but really we don't see a tremendous uptake. So now what I'm going to be talking about is just kind of the forest carbon markets and the new kind of offerings that are potentially available to these smaller landowners. Historically, when we've looked at the market kind of previously within the forest carbon markets, you see on the graph here the ownerships in yellow of percent of total forested acres across the US, and in the darker blue bars are the ones that are actually registered in forest carbon markets. So you can see the tremendous amount of our total forested acres, those land holdings are not really enrolled in markets, and the markets really have not serviced these landowners, and that the markets really have really focused on providing revenue to only the largest landowners. So the Nature Conservancy and the American Forest Foundation really worked to kind of address this and make these markets available to smaller land holdings, family forest landowners, to kind of provide them with support services to achieve their goals and provide them with revenue stream. And so some of the key innovations involved in the Family Forest Carbon Program that the American Forest Foundation and the Nature Conservancy developed is really making, smaller forest ownerships eligible. Also, it pays landowners a set rate to implement carbon beneficial practices as opposed to paying them based on the trends within the market. So it's a set payment to implement a practice. Additionally, it uses a methodology which is called a dynamic match baseline methodology that measures carbon in real time as opposed to kind of modeling out a baseline, which I'm happy to explain more of that if folks have questions. And the monitoring is across kind of a co-op of landowners that are enrolled in the program. The goals of the program are really to bring technical and financial assistance to family forest landowners to achieve their goals, to work with them to improve forest health and resilience through improved forest management, habitat restoration, and control of competing and invasive vegetation. And so to really also mitigate climate change through the sequestration of forest carbon on those lands. The eligibility for the program has 5 kind of key components. A landowner must have at least 30 acres of forest that meet the eligibility criteria. A landowner can enroll part of their property. Those forests must be comprised of kind of northern hardwoods such as maple, beech, and birch forests, so predominantly deciduous forest. They need to have sufficient stocking, and then the project area cannot have any encumbrances that restrict timber harvest activities, such as potentially like an easement that would preclude timber harvest. And the landowner needs to be able to sign a 20-year agreement. So this is a 20-year contract that the landowner is entering into. And so the benefits to the landowner have kind of four key components. One, they get access to practices that improve and maintain forest health. They receive annual payments to offset expenses they have, such as property taxes. And then they get free access to technical assistance, such as access to a forester and a management plan, kind of addressing that lack of technical assistance or professionals that currently our landowners in New York have. And then it gives access also to a broader community of forest landowners to kind of be up to date on current forest health issues and other trends within forest conservation and management. So generally how it works for the landowner, a landowner would find their property on the program's kind of secure online platform. They enter their information in. Once they get into the system, they get connected with a representative of the program to answer any questions. Then they'll be working with a forester to determine the eligibility of their property and discuss their goals. Once they feel comfortable with the program, they would kind of sign that 20-year agreement and then initially right away start receiving their payments. They would then be working with a forester to develop their management plan based on their goals. There are two practices currently within the program here in New York. The one is called Enhancing Your Woodland, and this is really designed for forest landowners who want to manage their woodland. And so this allows for some thinning and group selection, and the payment rate for this is $200 per acre over the 20-year enrollment period. The second program is Growing Older Forests. This is deferring timber harvest for 20 years. It does allow for some firewood harvest, and this pays $300 per acre over the 20-year enrollment period. And so far in New York, we have seen quite a bit of landowner interest. The program has been open in New York for approximately 2 years. And in the initial stages, we did a lot of more just local outreach, and really we're in a soft launch phase. In the fall of 2023, so approximately a year ago, we did a larger kind of marketing campaign with some of the materials you've seen here on the right. And so maybe you've seen some of these materials, and we've seen a tremendous amount of response. So the graph here to the left is basically just showing the increase in landowners that are interested in the program. And so currently within our kind of landowner journey, we have approximately 1,000 landowners that are interested over 100,000 acres. And this map here just shows the current enrollment across the entire Appalachian area. The program started in Pennsylvania and West Virginia, which has the highest enrollment. So there are over 500 landowners enrolled in the program currently across the entire program, almost totaling 100,000 acres. In New York State, over the last year, we have enrolled approximately 50 landowners, totaling almost around 5,000 acres in total. And so that number is growing. So we're really excited to increase the enrollment over the next year. So we're also working on piloting and adding tree planting practices to the Family Forest Carbon Program. And additionally, so this is another practice that really is a natural climate solution. We have 3 practices that we're currently piloting in different parts of New York State. The first is called Reforesting for the Future. So this is a program that's directly related to the Family Forest Carbon Program. So this is a practice that a landowner can implement on their property. They need to have 5 acres or greater of area for tree planting. This is at no expense to the landowner. All the trees, the planting, all the services are covered. They do receive a one-time incentive payment for $500 per acre, and this is associated with a 30-year contract to ensure those trees can reach maturity that are planted. So tremendous amount of upfront cost for the conservation organizations. But the landowner receives benefit, but they're kind of tying up that land for 30 years. Another practice that we're testing is called tapping land's potential. This is no out-of-pocket cost for the landowner again, but they do not receive a payment, but it has a shorter contract period. The last one is called planting with purpose. So this is an enhanced tree sale. The landowner receives a free tree planting plan. And then they are worked with where they receive some free trees, subsidized materials, and this is through the Soil and Water Conservation District tree planting sale. And so currently for these tree planting practices, we're working in Jefferson County on all 3 of the practices, Franklin County on the tree sale, and then in the Upper Susquehanna region in the southern tier on the reforesting for the future practice. And we believe that there's a tremendous amount of potential for reforestation tree planting in New York State. The Nature Conservancy and we completed a study where we looked at the tree planting potential across the state, and we found that there's over 1 million acres that are currently that would be suitable for tree planting that are idle lands that are currently not in agricultural production. And so this is reports available if anybody is interested in this. So currently we're not really planting a lot of trees in New York, probably less than 1,000 acres. So how do we really scale this effort to bring all the benefits that trees have and meet our climate mitigation goals? So just some concluding thoughts. Nature is part of the kind of the climate solution. So how we manage our forest, how we conserve our forest, and planting new forests can really be part of the climate mitigation solution. The Family Forest Carbon Program is an opportunity to address this. It supports our family forest landowners through providing financial resources, delivering kind of technical assistance through foresters and a forest management plan, and promoting forest health. So far, we've seen strong landowner interest, and we are hoping to increase enrollment. And lastly, as you saw, we're piloting some new tree planting practices across the state, and we're excited about that effort. So with that, I will answer any questions.
Thank you, Chris. That was excellent. Any questions for Chris? Go ahead and put them in the chat or raise your hand. I'm not hearing any. I thought that that one graphic you showed in the very beginning was pretty telling how the program's not necessarily reaching the folks you wanted to reach. There's that box again. I wonder if you stop share and then share the, what did he say? Share the screen and not just the window?
She's trying to ask a question.
So what we will do is we are John helped right here. Yeah, your hand up.
Oh, John, you have your hand raised and I can hear you.
You unmute.
Yep, you're gonna mute for it from the button, so you click on it.
I thought I did that already.
No, right there.
Where?
Okay. All right. Well, there's somebody with a raised hand, so let's see if we can find them. Oh, John has a hand.
Yeah,
Can you hear
sorry.
me, John?
Hi, John, I can hear you.
Okay, I have a question from an attendee.
Great.
Hi, Chris. Great presentation. You showed a map of Upper recently. You just showed the efforts happening in Upper New York. Do you work in areas outside of there, or do you have any areas that you could report to us outside of that area, or is that the target I'm just looking to get some equity in the rest of the balance of New York State. And then part two is I have a little issue when you said some of the requirements is there can't be any encumbrance on the land that restricts the timber harvest. And I'm wondering, there's a lot of good things that happen with conservation easements, recreation easements, and I wouldn't want to jeopardize those easements going forward to compete with this program. So I wonder, are we able to say, well, we're not going in there to clear cut. So if there was an occasional recreation or conservation easement, can't we manage both? Since it is, I mean, that is the goal, is to manage it correctly. So, you know, if it does get harvested, yes, people would come to town hall and complain, but you would do it in an aesthetically pleasing way and for the betterment of all parties. So again, I'm just looking at the bigger picture. We don't want the landowners to be strapped to say, do I want to do A or do I want to do B? B pays me something, but A would benefit the whole community if there was a recreational easement, a linear park, a trail on this property. Thank you.
Yeah, those are great questions. So, one, the first question just about where the Family Forest Carbon Program is open across the entire state of New York. So, landowners that would be interested could just go to the website. They just need to meet the eligibility criteria. That is currently open across the state. So, to all landowners down to 30 acres of enrollment. Secondly, the tree planting practice is just in a pilot stage right now. So I don't know if that was the question specifically about that, but we're just really trying to test to see what's going to work. But hopefully we'll be able to expand those efforts to other parts of the state. And then two, just to provide some additional detail on easements, I didn't explain that well. The Family Forest Carbon Program is compatible with easements. It just really gets down to the easement language. The easements that you describe would most likely be compatible with the program, and that is what we're striving to do. But if an easement would preclude harvesting, then by adding the program on top of that, there would be no additionality, right? Because the easement is already protecting or conserving those trees. And so the program has to show what's called additionality. And so we're working so it's generally a case-by-case basis, but we have numerous new projects where we're pairing Family Forest Carbon Program with easements. So yes, compatible, but on a case-by-case basis and depending on the easement language.
Chris, someone was asking about the website. Is that the correct website? If you look at the very last chat.
Yeah, let me quickly just put the website in the chat.
Okay.
So can you just read off while I'm doing that, kind of read off the next question?
That was that. I think that was it.
Okay, I thought there was some questions I saw in the chat about
Okay. Wondering if you could describe a little bit about where the money paid to the landowners come from.
Right. So the initial payment, so the program works in a unique way that landowners are being paid to implement carbon beneficial practices. So the Nature Conservancy and the American Forest Foundation has developed a tremendous amount of capital to pay for those practices. Then the carbon gets verified and credits are sold within the voluntary market. So it's pretty unique. And then those credit payments go back into the program, and the Nature Conservancy, American Forest Foundation vets carbon credit buyers, and this is through the voluntary carbon market.
Excellent.
Let's see here. Second question, looking for participating in the planting program. So it depends. Yes, we're interested in folks in the pilot planting. Just reach out to me. If you're interested in the planting program, it can accommodate, depending on the practice, multiple different sizes of landowners.
Thank you so much. That's a good place to end this. Chris will be back in the Gather booth if you have further questions, or they can reach out to him separately. We appreciate your time. Thanks for being here, Chris. Great.
Thank you so much.
All right, take care. Looking now for Gabriel and Aaron McKeon. So let me find you.
Yes.
Oh, we got Aaron. There you are, great.
Morning.
They'll be talking to us today about 9-element watershed planning. Guys, we have until 10:30, so I'll stop here on 10:25 and we'll check the chat and see what we have. Sound all right?
Thanks,
Sounds
Jen.
great.
Okay, take it away.
Quick questions.
Yeah,
Yeah.
thank you.
There's a second one regarding the owners. Which one do they opt for?
Right.
We've come across that.
Are we still all right, I will kind of get us rolling here, and then turn it over to Gabriel for just a second. So I'm Aaron McKeon with the Central New York Regional Planning and Development Board here in Syracuse. We are the regional planning board for a 5-county area that includes Oswego, Onondaga, Cayuga, Madison, and Cortland counties.
Aaron, can you see the notes view or the presentation view?
This looks like kind of the notes or like the slide design view.
Jen, how do you fix that with John?
You can you switch to presentation mode in PowerPoint? Are you seeing something different?
Oh,
Okay.
that's it. Oh, wait.
Well,
Now
so
I can see.
in display settings. Yeah.
Okay. That good?
Yep, perfect.
Okay. Sorry, Aaron, go ahead.
I'll start all over. I'm Aaron McKeon with the Central New York Regional Planning Board in Syracuse. And so Gabriel and I are going to talk about 9-element watershed plans, which is kind of a specific type of watershed plan. I will say my office has been involved with the Oneida Lake watershed plan now, or Oneida Lake 9E, I should say, for several years. And Gabriel has been doing, actually, I will let Gabriel take that part of that.
Yeah, hi everyone. I'll just introduce myself real quick and I'll take the second half of the presentation. My name is Gabriel Yerdon. I'm with the Tug Hill Commission, which you've already heard a little bit about today. And I've been a project specialist here, focusing mostly on natural resources for about 2 years.
So I will say I'm going to whip through kind of at a trot here the basic framework for a 9-element plan, and then Gabriel's going to talk a little bit more about the specifics of a plan that this, I believe, Sandy Creek's, right?
And Black River, yep.
Black River. Okay. Well, let's actually jump to the next slide and then the slide after that, because it's weird about this one. So I want to just start out by saying I always like to start these discussions with clarifying what a watershed is, because that's kind of the key term that gets thrown around in all these things. And if you don't have a good handle on what the watershed is, then everything's all lost from there. It's just all the land that drains into a given water body. But the reason it's important is because whatever is on the landscape, like whatever the land use in the watershed is going to have it really influences and really controls what is in the water body itself. So if you think about a very urbanized watershed, here in Onondaga County, we have Onondaga Lake that sits, it's used to be very industrialized. It's got the city of Syracuse on one end and villages on either side, and it used to have heavy industry right next to it. So the watershed, is very complicated and has led to some issues with Onondaga Lake. But if you think about a, pristine little pond or a lake in the Adirondacks surrounded primarily by trees, you can, you can bet the water quality is probably going to be pretty good just because of the land use surrounding it. All right, next slide. So figuring out how to, kind of control land use and influence land use and practices on the watershed is what is that's the purpose of watershed planning in general. A 9-element watershed plan is a specific kind of watershed plan that's got a little bit more of a structure to it than a traditional watershed plan that you might have picked up or worked on or be familiar with. Really kind of the analytical core, and there is an analytical core to a 9-element plan. That's kind of what sets it apart, as I say, is in the first 3 elements. That's where you're figuring out, you're going to quantify your pollutants in the water body. You're going to quantify the sources of those pollutants. Then you're going to set a goal for what the pollutant level should be in the water body, and you're going to identify the best management practices. So what can be done across the landscape, or what projects, policies, plans can be implemented across the watershed that are going to get you to your pollution reduction goal. That second element there. Then the rest of it, these 5 elements, the implementation, plan, monitoring, and evaluation, that's really the planning side. So once you kind of are through the analytical side, you can move into the planning side and start figuring out how are we going to implement the best management practices? What's the priority for each different idea that we have? What are some funding sources? And how are we going to measure the progress in the long term? You know, so over, say, a 5 to 15-year period, how are we going to know whether or not the analysis was accurate, whether or not the best management practices are working? So all of this gets kind of rolled into the 9-element plan. And then the 9th element is the stakeholder input that you see. And that's sort of throughout the whole thing. So that is important on the analytical side and obviously on the planning side. So I think, Gabriel, I think you're going to be getting into some of that public involvement material.
Yep.
Yeah, exactly. So that's really critical to the whole thing. And let's move on to the next slide. We'll talk about just kind of the modeling. I'm not going to wade into the modeling very deep here. I will say that, you know, the 9-element approach typically involves a watershed model. And that's simulating conditions across the entire watershed. And the reason that's necessary is because we're typically talking about non-point source pollution. We're typically talking about some, you know, as I say, pollutants that are washing off an entire landscape, not something that's coming out of a single pipe or another outlet. So one way to conceptualize this is to think about the difference between, say, the water that's coming out of a wastewater treatment plant. You know, that's going to have like a specific point. You can measure, you can learn a lot of information just about that one pipe and the water coming out of that one pipe, or whatever, how many pipes there are. But if you were to think about another source of pollution, say like all the road salt being applied to all the roads in a watershed, you know, that's going to mean you're talking about a variety of municipalities and private actors, you know, landscapers. So a lot of different people are going to be applying road salt. You might, you know, with road salt, you could probably just make a spreadsheet or something like that, but you'd want a way to conceptualize kind of this larger picture of all of the pollution. So that's kind of like where the modeling comes in. You're going to want to kind of capture everything across the whole watershed. Now, in the case of 9-element plans, we can go to the next slide. We're not really talking about road salt. That's really, I don't know. I mean, that's not something that I have dealt with. What we see in Central New York and in the Finger Lakes and other 9-element plans that I'm familiar with, the pollutant you're talking about, the thing you want to control, is really, it really boils down to phosphorus, which always, I think, I always feel a little silly because it's not what everybody expects. Nobody ever says, oh, I wonder how much phosphorus is in my drinking water. You know, people worry about like mercury or lead or PFAS or you know, things like that. But at the watershed scale and for the health of a lake, you really worry about the amount of phosphorus specifically, and in some cases, nitrogen. These are the nutrients. These are the building blocks for life. And these are plant food, really. And so they're what feeding, they are feeding the phytoplankton. They're the sort of the bottom part of the food chain or the food web. And it's critical for all life, but when you have too much, that's kind of where you see harmful algal blooms. Now that gets complicated. The sources and causes of harmful algal blooms are complicated, but what the science has said is that on average, across pretty much like all cases, it's the thing that you can kind of control for harmful algal blooms and for algae levels in a lake in general is the amount of nutrients in that lake. So this is critical to figuring out, you know, what the overall health of the lake is going to be. So let's go to the next slide and we'll talk about the sources of phosphorus. So again, this is where the modeling comes in. This pie chart here on the right side of the screen is a draft product from the draft Skinny Atlas Watershed 9-element plan. And this is just draft, but the analysis for this is really done. This is probably not going to change, but you know, you can see agriculture plays a large role in the Skinny Atlas Watershed, but it's not the only source of phosphorus. As I say, phosphorus it's a natural part of the environment. So it comes out of forests and a small amount comes out of wetlands. But, you know, residential land, you know, developed areas also, you know, produce phosphorus, and septic systems can be a major source of phosphorus and nutrients in the watershed. And as I say, these results, this pie chart comes out of the watershed model. Yeah, and that gets really complicated to talk about the model, but suffice it to say, it's incorporating information about soils, land use, land practices, and water sampling to kind of develop a sense of where phosphorus is coming from. Let's go to the next slide. So that kind of once you kind of have a sense of where the phosphorus, how much phosphorus there is in your water body, where it's coming from, now you can start to talk intelligently about a goal, where you want that phosphorus level to be ideally. In this case, this graph is from the Oneida Lake, and it kind of gives you a sense that historically, over the past 50-odd years, phosphorus levels in the lake were pretty high. So prior to 2005, or in the 70s and 80s, phosphorus levels were really high. There's that line there that separates the eutrophic from the mesotrophic. We don't necessarily have to get into all that, but that's kind of like the total level of algae production in the lake. And when you're up above that yellow line, that's really 20 parts per billion or 20 micrograms per liter. That's kind of an indicator level to say, okay, you've got more nutrients than the lake can really digest. You're going to have too much sort of algal production is going to be kind of out of control. So in the case of Oneida Lake, what we have said is, okay, based on the lake's history of primarily being eutrophic or overproductive, and looking ahead to the future, we really are very happy with roughly where it is, right around 20 micrograms per liter. That's going to be the goal for this lake. You might say, why would you set a goal to be pretty much where you are? But let's go to the next slide, because what we're looking at is with climate change, you're going to have a warming lake. A warmer lake is going to have more algae production, more phytoplankton growth, and more precipitation, or more severe precipitation events. And that's going to lead to more nutrients running from the landscape into the lake. So we will be very excited if in 20 years, given the projections for climate change, if we can hold the line, if we can stay right at that, what we just saw, that 20 micrograms per liter, that'll be great. So that's going to take a lot of work and a lot of best management practice implementation across the watershed, just to stay where we are and not slip into that eutrophic state again. Let's see the next slide. So this kind of I think you have to click through a few of these, Gabriel. It's like it's my little animation. So this is just to kind of say, when we talk about what we can do to get us to a target level, it's lumped under this umbrella term of best management practices, and there's all kinds of best management practices. That includes forestry, agriculture, what you do in urban areas for urban stormwater runoff, what you do on construction sites. And if we go to the next slide, the way this kind of gets wrapped into the 9-element process is we can again turn to our model of the watershed, and we can take a handful of these ideas for what we think are achievable BMPs across the watershed, and just kind of see, like, if we were to do something like cover crops, or if we were to do nutrient management on farms, or really try to push homeowners to make sure their septic systems are in good working order. Which of these ideas is going to be most effective given conditions in the watershed? So that's kind of part of this 9-element plan. Like, what can we do? What do we know has a real shot at getting us to our 9E targets? I think if we go to the next slide. So from the Oneida Lake 9-element plan, which is a work in progress, what we currently have for this side of things, the BMP modeling, we're looking at, first of all, we want to model future climate change. So we want to know, like, what is the outlook for the lake for over the next, say, 25, 30 years with increased temperature and increased precipitation? What do we expect that to do to conditions in the lake? Then we want to look at what if we could reduce septic system inputs. So, currently there's kind of a hodgepodge across the watershed. Some areas are, have better septic inspection. Some areas, have programs, but if we were really to make a concerted effort to ensure that septic systems are in good shape, could that really, could that improve conditions? And then we want to look at a variety of agricultural best management practices as well and see how effective those are going to be. And next slide. And then we kind of, this is just sort of a snapshot of an implementation plan. I mean, this just looks like a table, but it's, you see the BMPs on the left-hand side and who would be involved in that. How are you going to get money for it? What's an estimate of the cost? And where's it going to fall kind of in a rough schedule, priority. It's sort of just a implementation plan component. And the next slide. And then the question is, how do you know if the plan is working? I will say in the Finger Lakes, the Citizens Statewide Lake Assessment Program, or CSLAP, is great. That's a great way to keep track of the lake conditions. You get water samples that are compatible with DEC's metrics, and it's very good for getting a big picture view of the lake. But you're also going to want to do something about the sampling, tributary monitoring, that kind of thing. And then the kind of the long-term question is, what if the metrics are going the wrong way? As we saw with Oneida Lake in the past, phosphorus levels were higher. Well, what if they start spiking again? Then you kind of have to take a few steps back and say, okay, what can we do to really, look at this again? And then, is there a plan for starting the 9E process over and say on like a 10-year cycle? So that's what we're looking at, certainly in the case of Skaneateles Lake.
I guess my question would be, have you seen?
Next slide, Gabriel. So yeah, okay, so that's it. That's my discussion on the 9E framework. Take it away, Gabriel.
All right, so Jen, feel free to cut me off whenever.
I wasn't going to cut you off, but I would remember to put everybody on mute. So we're getting a little feedback. If you're not talking, please be on mute. Thank you.
Okay, I'm not sure if we're gonna run over into the break or not, but I might not be able to get to the Black River watershed. I was planning on talking about Sandy Creeks and Black River, but kind of the couple of things that I was hoping to highlight with these two case studies along with Oneida Lake was how watershed management planning and specifically 9-element plans can look different depending on different watersheds in question, and also running through some of the public involvement that's important to the 9-element planning process. So we've been a partner in all three and a little more so in the Sandy Creeks and Black River 9-element planning process. And for the Sandy Creeks 9-element watershed plan, at the bottom, you can see all the partners that were working together to make this happen. And specifically, Oswego County and Jefferson County Soil and Water Conservation Districts took the lead on this project. And we supported them, especially with the public involvement parts of it. This is the Sandy Creeks watershed. It's a much smaller watershed than Black River or Oneida Lake, and it comes with its own set of problems, water quality questions. The headwaters of the watershed are close to the Tug Hill Core Forest that was talked about in some of the earlier environmental track presentations. And then there's a heavy agricultural portion closer to the lake with several concentrated animal feed operations. And then there are embayments and several watershed or wildlife management areas closer to the lake shore, and also waterfront property owners. The proposed vision statement, which I think can give some insight into the planning process and public involvement. The goal of the Sandy Creeks 9E is to maintain existing water quality and ecosystem functions in the tributaries and improve nearshore water quality, ecosystem functions, and resiliency of Lake Ontario, including nearshore embayments, while preserving the values of local communities, including recreation and fishing. This is just a snapshot of some of the existing DEC data prior to the start of the 9-element plan. And part of the reason that this 9-element plan was initiated is because DEC data was pretty sparse, and a lot of these sections hadn't been sampled since the mid-2000s to mid-2010s. So very little recent water quality data prior to the water sampling for this plan. I won't go too much into this because Aaron already touched on some of this for Oneida Lake, but total phosphorus was also a question in this 9-element plan. And the snapshot of the timeline was tributary monitoring after the initial public involvement, then the watershed modeling and scenarios like Aaron already went over. This was the sampling plan that Upstate Freshwater Institute proposed, and they helped train technicians from the 2 soil and water conservation districts to do the sampling themselves over the course of 12 months. And in order to maximize the budget for the project, they had one sampling site at the bottom of each sub watershed in order to kind of figure out if there were any problems further up in those sub watersheds, and they could continue sampling from there if they saw any red flags, sort of. And then all of the things that they were testing for over here on the left. And there are some additional things besides phosphorus, obviously, such as fecal coliform, pH, temperature, etc. This is some more about modeling potential scenarios like Aaron went over, similar to that watershed, septics, ag, forest regeneration, climate change considerations. So some of the stakeholder outreach for the Sandy Creek's 9-element watershed plan. In January 2023, we had an introductory stakeholder meeting, and it was interesting. This was a smaller watershed than some of the other watersheds around Tug Hill, but it happened to be a lot easier to involve the community, I think, because these small towns, more tight-knit community, for some reason, it was a lot easier to engage landowners, agricultural farmers, and also shore owners were all very invested in the plan from the beginning. So we had the introductory meeting, and then from there we decided to have 5 focus groups of conservation, business and recreation, agriculture and landowners, municipal leaders, and shoreline riparian owners. And there we were trying to dig a little deeper into the concerns that people had over the watershed, water quality conditions, things they wanted to see in the future, changes they'd seen in the watershed over the years, etc., and hope that they could speak more freely in smaller groups of either like-minded or similar interested people. Then we had one more meeting right after that to kind of share outward the findings from the focus groups. And then sampling happened throughout 2023 into 2024. And then we had another meeting to share the water quality findings from the year-long sampling endeavor. And this is just a snapshot. I won't go through all these of just different, some of the feedback that we got during the focus groups. People mentioned a marina by the lake with nitrates in their wells. We had people voicing concerns about CAFOs and ag, invasive species, and a lot of large variety of concerns that we took into consideration, and also some semi-point source concerns that UFI was considering when they were making their sampling plan. We also asked them what kind of modeling scenarios they would like to see, and that was also considered in the by UFI and the project team when they were planning for their modeling. And all right, I'll try to just give a quick overview. Or I know we're probably over time. Do you want to start questions, or do you want?
Yeah, I want to acknowledge there is a break from 10:30 to 10:30 to 10:45. So Gabriel, if you want to just quick get these questions,
Okay.
and then if folks want to hang through the break, they can. If not, then we'll go from there.
Perfect.
So do you want me to read them to you, or?
Sure.
Sure. How do residents, what's the residential impact on phosphorus? How do residents contribute to the phosphorus load?
Yeah, I'll say that, you know, what you really have to think about is residential use of fertilizer, like phosphorus-based fertilizer. I think that's what the model kind of predicts, is that a certain amount of residential land is going to have fertilizer applied to it. Now that, you know, it's debatable whether or not that's necessary, but I think the reality is it's out there and it's being used. You know, then there's going to be things like people who are not picking up animal waste, that kind of thing. From their pets, that's kind of like a minor contribution, but there are little things that kind of add up across the residential land use.
And then less direct, but residential septic systems are also a big contributor.
Yeah.
Especially along Oneida Lake and Sandy Ponds and some of those lakeshore areas.
Yeah.
One question wanted us to go back to the original 9 elements, and while you're flipping back there, the third question was, is there funding to support communities developing 9E plans?
Yeah, I should have said on the outset that our plans in our office are supported through the Department of State's Local Waterfront Revitalization Program funds. So Department of State has been very, very generous, I think, across the whole state with supporting 9-element plans as part of the LWRP program. I know DEC's been a great partner, DOS has been a great partner, but on the funding side, DOS is what we've been taking advantage of.
Awesome, great. Folks, a couple folks dropped off, but if you want to get quickly through your Black River slides, we could do that.
Was there a question about these 9 elements, or the person just wanted to see the
I
slide?
just wanted to see the slide again. Yep.
Okay. So you can see over in the left-hand side, Sandy Creek, Pulaski area. That's where I was talking about the Sandy Creek's 9-element plan. And then much larger and sprawling across Tug Hill and the Adirondacks, the Black River watershed. And the Black River watershed has had a lot more planning and implementation efforts over the years, and the watershed management planning process has been a lot more continuous and iterative than a smaller watershed like that. So the Black River watershed is over 1.2 million acres. It includes parts of 5 counties, and its headwaters are in the western Adirondacks. It drains into Lake Ontario, and also includes eastern Tug Hill and drains the eastern Tug Hill into the Black River Valley. This is an overview of the watershed management planning process and how it got started up until 24 with the most recent iteration of a watershed management plan. And 2016 is when it got its original 9-element watershed management plan. Some of the threats in this watershed include climate change, invasive species, hydrological changes and stream channel modification, nutrients, stormwater, etc. After the original Black River Watershed Management Plan and its 9E plan in 2016, there's been a lot of implementation work in 5 different categories, and I just put a couple of examples. But for education, the Black River Watershed Conference happens every year, and I'll have a slide about that. For development, infrastructure, and stormwater management, one project was the Jefferson County Stormwater Coalition, a coalition of 9 municipalities that work together to comply with state stormwater requirements. The Beaver River Septic System Replacement Program is part of the Septic System Replacement Fund that's expanded to all 4 counties around the Tug Hill region. And I'll move on from there. The 2016 Black River 9E plan was developed to meet federal requirements for watershed plans and to help get federal funding. And a lot of work had already been done in the earlier watershed planning process. The goals of the plan were to reduce phosphorus, nitrogen, and sediment loading in the watershed. And you can see 3 of the priority sub-watersheds. Stakeholder engagement for that watershed management plan was outreach to over 400 stakeholders that were involved in the development of the original plan, including municipal representatives, code enforcement officials, community planners, and other interested citizens. And it helps that with this watershed, there's kind of an infrastructure of involved community organizations, agencies, municipalities that we're able to re-engage with each time a new version of the plan or a new planning process is started up. Outreach to the Soil and Water Conservation District, extremely important in these plans, and through water quality coordinating committees. Each year, we help host the Black River Watershed Conference primarily with the Lewis County Soil and Water Conservation District, but also with the help of the other districts around the watershed. And this provides an annual forum for stakeholders across the watershed to come together and learn about important work being done relating to water quality, ecological conditions, and research opportunities. And the 15th annual Watershed Conference will be held in 2025. Reach out if you have any interest in that. And also the Black River Initiative newsletter goes out to all of the partners in the watershed each year for them to learn about. It's a more accessible way for people to learn about work going on in the watershed. And that's about all we have. I don't know if there are any more questions. I know we're in the break now, but.
Thank you, everybody. Well, that was a great presentation. Thank you so much, and we'll see you after the break.
Okay, great.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Start. And I'd like to introduce Lindsay Auden from Croton-on-Hudson Sustainability Committee to talk to us about climate smart communities and clean energy communities programs.
I can
Welcome.
start. Okay.
Sure. Right ahead.
Okay, welcome everyone. My name is Lindsay Auden. I am the chair of Croton's Sustainability Committee. Croton is a small 8,000 population in northern Westchester County, about 30 miles north of New York City. We are very active in 2 of the state's programs for fighting climate change, that is reducing greenhouse gas emissions and related efforts. One is called the Climate Smart Community, or CSC. The other one is called the Clean Energy Community, or CEC. Yes, I know that's confusing. I didn't make this up. This is how the state worked with it. There are plans to eventually marry or merge these 2 programs probably next year because they do overlap. So what are the CEC and CSC programs? New York State offers a variety of ways to help communities cut their greenhouse gas emissions, hereinafter known as GHGs. They're free, these programs. Over 900 municipalities, more than half of all the municipalities, and that includes villages, towns, cities, and counties in the state are members of one or the other or both. Through various defined tasks, which I will describe to you, the programs promote education, funding, and pursuing actions, things that actually can make a difference. For example, and you're seeing in the lower left-hand corner, the rooftop of Croton's Department of Public Works building, where we have installed a 301 kilowatt solar system. And that helps reduce greenhouse gas emissions, and also because it's leased rooftop provides a small amount of revenue for the village on a yearly basis, and those leases run 25 years. Now, each of the 2 programs, CSC and CEC, offer professional assistance, recognition, awards, pats on the head, that kind of thing, and especially grants, money to support those efforts. Right now they operate independently but work with each other. You do something in one program, it'll earn points there. It may also earn points in the other, and back and forth. As I mentioned, next year they're likely to be merged. Then it'll be much easier to not have to have all the alphabet soup. Now, these programs focus you on specific tasks. One of the challenges of climate change is that it can feel overwhelming. Some people try to do too much, too fast. But having been in this business and working with this for over 40 years, I will tell you that trying to do everything at once usually ends up doing nothing well. One of the good things about CEC and CSC is that they provide the focus, the organizational structure needed to more than just fret about the problem. You maybe have heard about various studies that have been done on young people about their anxiety over climate. Well, one of the things I've learned being involved in this area and previous under energy management is the way you move ahead is you turn your anxieties into actions and your actions into achievements. And the CEC and the CSC programs help you do that. No, you don't get paid. I don't get paid. You have to do this work on your own, but you can hire contractors to do some of this for you. Here's an example of one of the tasks. Some of them are rather mundane. You inventory your government vehicles. Croton did this. It's both a CEC and CSC task for which you get points. In doing so, we found that several had very high odometer readings. Some of our trucks and things like that, which pointed us to say, oh yeah, next time we're going to replace one of them, which ought to be pretty soon because they're going to conk out in a couple of miles. Let's replace them with EVs. Let's get that built into the budget. Let's get a grant to pay for part of it. It sets you up for what you're going to do next so you can merge yourself into whatever else the municipality is doing as part of their regular business, buying trucks, that kind of thing. And that way you sort of work the idea of climate change action into whatever else is going on. Now, CEC and CSC can also help you develop projects, things like the rooftop solar. You will learn in this process how to use various data tools. One of them is EPA's, that's the Federal Environmental Protection Administration, program called Portfolio Manager. It's basically a spreadsheet. If you've done Excel, it's the same thing. But it allows you to compare building energy efficiencies against each other and against a national database of comparable buildings in the same climate area. So for example, if you've got a police station, they have like the standard greenhouse gas emissions for a police station based on pounds or tons per square foot. And they give you a score between 0 and 100. If you're at 50, then you are equal to the typical police station, and you're using no more or no less than them. But if you go above 50, you're doing better. If you go below 50, you're not doing as good, and you ought to get your act together. CSC and CEC also provide, as I mentioned, grants for things like energy audits that can help you find ways to save energy and cut greenhouse gases, and also possibly to save money, things that municipalities are very interested in doing. They help you develop projects like LED streetlights that cut municipal energy bills. If your municipality is still using old high-pressure sodium or HID types of lamps, this is a slam dunk. Streetlights stay on for over 4,000 hours a year. Anything you can do to make them more efficient and not wear out as quick, and LEDs last way longer. There are programs to help you do this, and they have a good payback. So even if you're not interested in saving the planet, it'll always help to save some money. So using the resources of these programs, you'll also see how to mitigate effects of climate change. Some of the tasks involve, especially from CSC, things like preserving wetlands, planting forests, and a variety of other actions, community gardens, that kind of thing. So the resources of these programs can help you develop those. They have standardized projects that have been done by others, and they will give you links to show how the other guy did it. And so therefore, you've got templates to follow as you go along. You're not necessarily having to create something out of whole cloth, so to speak. Now, each program has a reward and rating process. State programs like to have you rated so that they can see who's doing what when, and they give you different ways to do this. I'll describe them in a minute. And they also have various types of rewards, commendations, points, etc. So I'm going to describe each program's rating reward process. CEC rates participants on a 1 to 5 star system. You earn more stars, you get more points for performing those tasks. Here's a map of all of the CEC communities. The different colors mean things. If it is yellow or gold, whatever you want to call the yellow color, that means that they have gotten at least 3 out of the top 5 stars. Those that are in blue are some that have fewer than 3 stars and are working their way up. Those that are in gray, they're members of the program, but they haven't gotten very far just yet. And this map changes all the time. This is correct as of about 2 months ago. You can see that a lot of it is clustered where there's a lot of population down in the downstate area, and also where there are large cities and a lot of communities across the state. More stars yield more and bigger grants. In the CEC program, the grants go up to $300,000 for things that cut greenhouse gases, like a solar rooftop or whatever. CEC also gives small grants for merely promoting things. You don't have to build anything, you don't have to spend a lot of money, but if you foster a campaign, and they will walk with you on how to do all this and send you templates. A campaign to promote solar power in residences or small businesses or whatever, to promote use and purchase of electric vehicles and also heat pumps. So those are between $5,000 and $60,000. Small, but relatively easy to get. You can get batches of them. We've gotten now, I guess almost 20 of these things. And you batch them together and you can use them then to fund a much bigger project than you could do with just one of these little grants. One of the great things about the CEC grants is they do not require matching funds. So what we have done with many of these grants is we looked at projects like a solar rooftop. I'll show you an example in a minute. Cobbled together a bunch of these little grants and figured out if we could do the project with just grant money so that when we go to the village board and say, hey, we'd like to put solar panels on the firehouse rooftop, can we do that? When they say, oh, what's that going to cost us? We say, nothing. We have grants to cover the whole thing. Now tell me why you don't want to do it. And it can be very persuasive to say, we're going to bring you an amenity that's going to cut your electric bills, improve your stature as far as being a climate sensitive community, and also get some other jobs done at the same time. In one case, we used one form of financing, not one of these grants, but something similar, to not only put up a solar rooftop, but to first fix the rooftop, which needed some work because it was like 30 years old and there was stuff that needed fixing. So we're able to fix a rooftop, which the village would have to do anyway, and then put solar panels on top. So that's CEC. Now, CSC has a slightly different process. It's a point-based system based on tasks that can yield levels of certification. This is similar to the 1 to 5 point system, but it's a little more involved. And again, here's a map. You see it's very comparable to the previous map. A lot of municipalities are members of both. So you may see the similarity in your locale. This is a little different. Those that are, the teardrops look like they're brown. Those are what are called bronze. About 33% of the CSC towns are bronze. Only about 3% have achieved silver. You can't even see them here, so I'll circle them. They look like gray droplets. So there's only a small number. So Croton is a silver certified climate smart community and has been since September of 2020. We are a leader in that program as well. We're one of the top 3 in the state. Now under CSC, the grants range from $10,000 to as high as $2 million. And that's for things that might be bigger actions. Things like climate action plans, where you're going to have to hire a contractor. And yes, the grant will pay for the contractor, somebody who knows how to do this stuff. But also modest things like composting or recycling programs. And again, you can get a grant to do this. As I'll mention in a few minutes, Croton got a little grant, $15,000, to set up our pilot food scrap recycling program, which then burgeoned and expanded. Now it's got like 120 people in it. So these things go very quickly. But this is seed money stuff. They don't continue giving you grants to continue something. They give you seed money to get it started. I will tell you, though, that under CSC, matching funds may be required. A matching fund may not necessarily be money that's allocated from the village coffers. It might be hour time offered by your Department of Public Works or something else that's comparable to an in-kind contribution. So what kind of tasks get performed? Croton is, as I say, a leader. We are small, 8,300 people, but we hold the state's highest CEC score and became silver certified by performing these and a variety of other tasks. This is just a sample list. So we did greenhouse gas inventory for the whole community. We have installed heat pumps in some of our buildings. We put, of course, LED lights in all our streets, parking lot, decorative and park fixtures. We did that 5 years ago. We also, through various other committees, including our CAC, our own local Conservation Advisory Council, and others, they have done some of these programs themselves. For example, our local CAC sponsors a repair cafe. I'm sure most of you know about this, but I'm told I should tell you because it's not everywhere. This is an event that's held every now and then, usually at a municipal site indoors, wherein people who have broken appliances that they would otherwise throw out into a landfill or buy more of can bring those items in, like a lamp, a toaster oven, broken screens, that kind of thing, light stuff that you can carry in. That there are people who will come, and this is all set up ahead of time, who like to do repairs, fix-it people. And all this work is free unless there's some parts that they have to buy for you or whatever. And you get credit for doing repair cafes. Croton has had 2 of them so far, and I know many others in the Hudson Valley area have done them as well. And both CEC and CSC give credits for these past efforts. So even though you may not have been a member of any of these programs, if you've done some of these tasks already, as soon as you sign up, file for the points for those tasks. We also did other things. We got a tree planting program. We passed what's called the Energy Stretch Code, which is an improvement on the building building code, etc. So we did all this stuff. We got the grants. What did we do with the grants? Our sustainability committee, which is what I head, and which coordinates a lot of this stuff, we work to cut Croton's municipal GHG emissions. We also work on residential, but we're tasked primarily with cutting the municipal GHG emissions. So we work with other community programs as well. The committees, as I mentioned, our local CAC, also a bike pedestrian committee that focuses on transport infrastructure, and CAC, of course, focuses on natural resources. We prioritize our actions based upon, get ready for this, the lowest cost per avoided metric ton of equivalent carbon per year. This is basically a way to say, we're going to look at projects wherein we get the biggest carbon reduction bang for the grant buck. Not necessarily payback, as you would normally do for an investment, but something wherein if you're going to get a grant, spend the money wisely, get the biggest bang for the buck. So we prioritize these things by analyzing them. We replaced all of our building lighting in our indoor lighting in our DPW, municipal building, and our 3 firehouses with LEDs, and got that under a CEC grant, paid for the whole thing. We also have put in under a different grant, a DEC grant, and it's DEC that runs CSC. Sorry for the alphabet soup. Installed electric vehicle chargers. We have now a war chest, if you will, of about $650,000 in CEC grants that either have paid for or will pay for things like energy audits, the LEDs in buildings, the chargers, the heat pumps, and solar arrays. This array down in the lower left-hand corner was installed totally with grants from CEC. It's a 36 kilowatt solar rooftop, provides all the power for the small firehouse. That's about a 4,200 square foot building. And that cut the bills, electric bills, in half or more, and was a very nice little project, and a lot of people liked it. It was a cute little way to do this, show that you can do it without having to spend village money, and the village will make back savings just on the electric bills. We also got a CSC grant for our food scrap recycling program. And together those efforts, because we logged them and documented them, had them all ready to go, we used them to apply for a $150,000 DEC grant, separate program, that is going to install another 12 electric vehicle charge ports at our train station, plus all the infrastructure, the wires, the pipes, the switchboard, blah, blah, all that stuff is going to get paid for by that $150,000 DEC grant, which we got by doing a lot of this other stuff. Now, none of this is actually easy. It involves real work. Both programs require excuse me, they require reading and using various guidance documents. It's not quite as bad as what this lady's experiencing in our picture, but it sometimes feels like it. There are Excel toolkits. There's various stuff you need to learn how to do this, but all of it is helped you by these templates and by the CEC and CSC staff. They will help you figure out which tasks to perform that may feel challenging, but are more appropriate in your community than others. For example, if you haven't done LED lights indoors in your municipal buildings, do it now. There's also utility money to help out on this stuff. Or if you haven't done your street lights, do it now. And that's where the personnel from CEC and CC can come in handy. They are live people, not AI, eager to help you get the jobs done. Now, they offer a professional approach, which is very helpful to newbies, people who have not been involved in these kinds of programs, to guide you through the whole process and get the jobs done. One of those tasks that you have to do on a regular basis is, and their professional approach will help you on, is to document your work. Those of you that have sought grants in the past know you can't just walk up to a grant agency and say, "Hi, I'm helping save the planet. Give me 50,000 bucks." They're going to come back and say, "Okay, tell me what you've done already. What have you figured out? Who are you going to do this with? Show me some documentation of what you've done in the past. You got any photographs of what you've done? One of the members of my sustainability committee, his primary function is just to walk around and take pictures of stuff. We had an event yesterday where we were showing off the construction work on our 4.2 megawatt solar canopy installation at our train station. And Dave Goldman was there snapping lots of pictures along with various other media. And we will now use that in our presentations and to do other fundraising, etc. So this kind of documentation is essential. Imagine if you did want to go to court to back up your climate saving claims, and you had to do so in front of Judge Judy. She's going to ask you for all kinds of questions. Show your work, please. Otherwise, you're not going to win. Fortunately, both programs guide you to maintain a robust paper trail as you perform these tasks and will help you when you seek grants to finance your projects. This kind of thing can also create confidence in your work and support from municipal officials. Because if you're going to go before a village board or a planning board or whatever and say, I've got this great idea. Have you got it on paper? You got a plan? You got a budget? What do you got? So that these programs can help you put together some of that so that when you go before others to try to make your case and either get matching grants or worse yet, permission to do this stuff on municipal property, you've got something to back it up. Now, nobody ever said this stuff was going to be easy. I will warn you ahead of time. Only about 1 out of 4 projects you start are ever going to see daylight. Only about 1 out of 4 of these things, whatever it is, a community garden, a solar array, EV program, 1 out of 4 works. The other 3 dies on the bulletin on the drawing board, or it never gets approved, or becomes too expensive, or whatever. So you have to be ready to fail. Failure is a very good way to learn. I will tell you that sometimes all this is going to feel a bit like you're climbing a steep hill in the dark. You're never quite sure where you're going. You're not even sure where the top is. You're not sure where all the other people are behind you. It's always an uphill climb. If the stuff doesn't feel like an uphill climb, then you're still doing all the easy stuff and you need to move on and take on the hard ones. But a lesson we all learn in life is that the only way you ever get to the top of anything is by going uphill. So be ready for that. That's normal. But when you succeed at doing one of these projects, it is a great feeling. You'll have done something great for your community, for your nation, and for the planet. And CEC and CSC offer the helping hands to get you there. So, in conclusion, let me say thank you very much for your efforts, whatever they are, to help protect our planet. If you want to learn more about these programs, go to these 2 long web links, climatesmart.ny.gov or nycerta.ny.gov/CEC. And with that, I will conclude and hand the program back to our host.
Thank you so much. That was very informative and entertaining. I am glad I was muted because there were several outbursts of laughing while you were speaking, but no, this was very engaging. And I had not heard that they were merging these programs next year. What a relief. So,
yeah.
Great. So there's a couple of comments and conversations in the chat. One of them had to do with are there now warmer or cooler temperature LED street lamps that at least mimic the color of the old sodium lights? And I think Clayton from Dutchess County said yes.
Absolutely, yes. At first, if you go back 5 years ago, you're pretty much stuck with 4000K or higher, and that's a very, very white, bluish light. Now you can get anything down to about 3000K. It's part of what you have to specify, just like anything else. You buy a car, you want to tell how many tires you're going to get, right? So you can specify 3000K. I would suggest you go and look at some other communities, because we put in the equivalent of about 4000K. And at first, of course, prior to that, we had high pressure sodium, which is like 2700 or 2500K, very orange and very yellowy. And people said, oh, this doesn't look the same, and it's a different dispersal, and what's going to happen? The answer is, after about 2 or 3 weeks, people get used to it. And especially they like the reduction in glare, because when you have an LED street light, you can make sure all the light goes down onto the surface and not into your eye from a distance. And it actually does help. And the color temperature and be able to control the glare, all that you can do by specifying and by working with somebody who has done street lighting before.
Great, thank you. Dean asks, doesn't solar PV provide only minimal avoided CO2 since New York Power Authority's supply is already quite clean?
Well, let's look closely at what that is and how that is located. In upstate New York, that's like north of Poughkeepsie or whatever, Newburgh, then yes, most of your power comes from both hydro and nuclear. And that's pretty clean to begin with. Still not absolutely clean, but better than most. Downstate where I am, and that's where most of the people are, alas, we no longer have nuclear. The last nuclear plants at Indian Point were shut down several years ago. And now over 90% of our electricity comes from burning natural gas. And so suffice to say, the pounds per kilowatt hour of CO2 are roughly triple what you are in upstate New York. And on Long Island, it's a whole bunch more people, it's even worse. It's almost like 4 times or 5 times as much pounds per kilowatt hour as you have upstate. So all this stuff you have to balance. And as I say, we do it based upon the best bang for the buck, the most CO2 reduction for each dollar of grant money we get. And if that means for whatever you don't put LED streetlights, fine, go find something else. But you're going to find that the things that run for a long time use a lot of electricity and oftentimes are good shots, even though you're in a relatively clean area. But NEIWPCC power, New York Power Authority power, is not zero emissions by any means. And there's still a lot of action you can take.
Great, thank you. Kate wants to know, does anyone know of programs for schools, K through 12, to get grants to do some of these actions?
The answer is yes. A lot of this stuff is very specific. You start with your CEC and CCSC coordinators for your area, and these are done by regions. And things that may be available downstate may not be available upstate. So I won't get into the weeds on that, but suffice to say you need some guidance. The answer is yes. If you are in, for example, Westchester County or New York City, which has NEIWPCC power supply for the municipalities, or are in a municipal utility area that gets its power from NEIWPCC, you may have access to NEIWPCC programs, that's New York Power Authority programs, which have done work for K through 12. And that's a good place to start. There are also other programs, and you can use, depending upon the program and what it is, you can use some grant money to do work for school districts or school buildings if they are part of the municipality. And I know in different areas, like in Croton, our school district is a functionally separate entity. So with them, what we did in our schools, we got them to do what's called a energy performance contract, or EPC. And the New York State Department of Education, DOE, pushes people in schools to say, if you're going to do anything, do an energy performance contract in which a developer comes in, pays for the whole kit and caboodle, and you pay him back over time for the project out of your reduced electric or utility costs, gas, whatever it is. And EPCs are a good way to work with schools because that's pretty much constant throughout the state, regardless of who you get the power from.
John is continuing his thought regarding street lamps. I guess my concern is some people might have rushed to get cheaper full spectrum lights. And then he says, regarding CSC, is it a grant-driven? It's a grant-driven program, which is good. And he says, I'm wondering if we might have refined maps that go beyond showing mere status.
Again, start, because this is all regional, there are CEC and CSC coordinators for each region. I think there's like 5 regions or 6 regions in the state, and you go with them and they can help you find what's going on in your region. And like I say, downstate and upstate or Long Island, it's very different. So start with them and they will guide you on that.
Patricia says, we've been told several times that a task was outdated, so we couldn't get credit for it.
That's true too. These programs have time limits. We just recently recertified under Silver certification, but a couple of tasks we wanted to bring in there were over 5 years old, and we're told, do you want to do that? You got to do the task over again. So the answer is yeah. And again, you work with your coordinators, and they will help you go through those long documents that I showed the lady reading all those documents of books and things. They will help you go through that, and then you can download a little spreadsheet which shows what the lifetime is for each of the tasks. Some, like an energy audit, you don't have to do them again for 10 years. Some others, they last 2 years, and then you got to go do them again.
So John says he's in Newcastle, right next door to Croton. He wants to see by municipality how many installs, how many estimated electric use, waste use, more of a dashboard that could allow municipalities to choose which categories to compete against each other on. So,
And I know that's a completely different model going forward, but I've always been curious about that. If that
Yes. Each of the programs has a dashboard. They're a little different. You have to maneuver around. And again, the coordinators can work with this, but they're all open file on that kind of thing. And what CEC has is a scoreboard that shows the top 3 in the region, where the Mid-Hudson region. It'll be different for you for another region. Well, you're in Newcastle, so you're still Mid-Hudson. Yeah. And you can see who the top 3 are in the region and who the top 3 are in the state. That's CEC. Of course, you'll see Croton as the top. Thank you very much. And for CSC, they have a different process wherein you can log in to see what other guys have done and actually download their submissions. You can't do that with CEC. The good thing about downloading submissions is you can see what the other guy did and say, oh, I could do that. I could just take out that name, put Newcastle in, change a few other things, and submit it. And I know it's going to be an acceptable submission because they accepted that format before. And basically, steal other people's stuff and adapt it for your own use. Don't start things from scratch. And that's also available through the CSC website.
Right. I mean, I would just say, just more specifically, if I can ask, I know we are bronze or silver these days, and silver, I guess.
Great.
Certified last week. Fabulous. And that gives this the total point. And I guess if I could look at the report, I guess I'm just trying to see, because the really the concrete numbers of we've got this number of PV installations, we've got this number of people in renewable, just the core numbers, because it's a different model, what I have in mind. And it would be a completely different program almost than how it's done.
When the 2 programs are merged next year, contact them and suggest it. But believe me, when they started both of these programs, especially CSC, which goes back a number of years, it needed a lot of work. I have sent numerous change suggestions in. Sometimes they do them, sometimes they don't. But they're always, working on this to make it better. So you got a better idea, throw it in. They'll steal it and make it. That's how the program will look.
Yeah. Okay. All right.
Any other questions? Okay, then thank you very much. Thank you for helping protect our planet, and thank you for giving me the opportunity to address the New York State Association of Conservation Councils, an excellent organization, and I hope some of your people learn and find out whether or not their community is involved in one of these programs and how they can work with them and make everybody better at fighting climate change. Thank you.
Thanks for wading us through all that alphabet soup. That was wonderful. You have about 8 minutes to grab a cup of coffee, to get a breath of fresh air. Our next speaker is in the house. We'll just, let's plan on meeting back here about 11:24, and then we'll get started with Alyssa and the wildlife connectivity presentation. All right, thank you.
Bye now.
Recording in progress. Thanks everybody for joining us. This is our last presentation before our lunch break, and I'd like to introduce Alyssa Fadden from the Nature Conservancy to talk to us about the Staying Connected initiative. Thank you.
Great, thanks so much, Jennifer. Hi, everyone. It's so nice to be here. Thanks for having me. As Jennifer said, I'm Alyssa Fadden. I'm with the Nature Conservancy, and I'm excited to share a little bit about our wildlife connectivity work, both within and beyond New York. So, as many of you may know, the Nature Conservancy is a global conservation organization. We're dedicated to conserving the lands and waters on which all life depends. So first, I'm going to start off just with some context on this issue that I'm sure many of you are familiar with, and then I'll get into some of our different strategies and how they touch down. So the reason that we're concerned about habitat connectivity, is because even with the continued expansion of protected areas around the world, biodiversity loss has continued to accelerate, and species are disappearing currently at a rate of 100 times higher than the average rate of extinction over history. The vast majority of North American mammals are down 20% and much higher for some. And, one reason for this loss is that most protected areas are just not large enough to maintain biodiversity within their boundaries, particularly as, adjacent areas experience increasing impact. And, although protected areas are critical, ecological islands will not maintain species, genetic diversity and functions in the long term. And so, connectivity across landscapes is really essential. And it's especially important during this time of rapid climate change. A review of decades of peer-reviewed articles points to connectivity as critical for protecting biodiversity in the face of climate change. We know that our protected areas are essential for sustaining biodiversity. And so if you think of our protected areas as sort of like the organs of our Earth, then connectivity is like our circulatory system. So, while connectivity is important for all species and accordingly has many different scales, we often focus our work on meeting the needs of the widest ranging mammals. In addition to like daily and seasonal movements, we're really interested in the longer term, kind of more range shift movements. And with these species, the thinking is if you can meet their needs, you can likely meet the needs of many different species. And so, scientists often refer to these kinds of species as umbrella species. As the climate changes, wildlife will be forced to adapt to shifting home ranges. A connected landscape makes these movements possible, while a fragmented landscape prevents it. So this is just one depiction, some modeling that was done a few years back of what some very general migration movements might look like for wildlife and different groups of species. And as you can see, our region and the East really stands out as an important pathway. Studies across the world show that on average species are already moving at a rate of 11 miles north and 36 feet higher in elevation every decade. So here in the northeastern US, our landscape is dominated by temperate, deciduous, and mixed forest. So this map shows the original distribution of those forests globally. So if you keep an eye on that light green, this is what remains unfragmented today. So the area circled here is the Northern Appalachian Acadian ecoregion, where we are. And this region is globally significant. It's the most intact forest of this kind remaining in the world. And so focused efforts can really help ensure that our landscape remains connected. And that is the goal of the Staying Connected Initiative. So the Staying Connected Initiative, or SCI for short, I may refer to throughout the presentation, is a binational public-private partnership that we help to lead across 5 states and 3 provinces, really focused all on habitat connectivity of the Northern Appalachian Acadian ecoregion. So I think it was nearly 2 decades ago, a landscape-wide analysis of the region found that, while we have millions of acres conserved, we're not immune to habitat fragmentation and climate change and are at risk for becoming a series of ecological islands. So as a result, key areas were identified. Those are shown as arrows on this map, as especially important for ecoregional connectivity. So these are areas where we see conservation action as essential, and we call these our linkage areas. And these linkage areas connect larger, more intact forest cores. So, no one organization alone can ensure the connectivity of such a large region. And so SCI brings together over 70 partners now, including state and provincial natural resource and transportation agencies, conservation organizations, land trusts, academics. This is just some of those that are listed here. There are lots more at the local level. And really the goal is to try to leverage the unique role and expertise of each partner. And I'll note that SCI was actually founded in New York by the Nature Conservancy, DEC, DOT, and the Tug Hill Commission, and now includes many other conservation organizations and many local land trusts. So, while we've been working on connectivity across the Northeast for 15 years or so now through the Staying Connected initiative, in more recent years, the Nature Conservancy has recognized the need to be thinking on an even bigger, really a continental scale. If you recall that the map that showed the moving, the circuit movement a few slides ago, the full Appalachian chain really stands out as the best opportunity for wildlife movement in the East. So this geography spans, 2,000 miles across 17 states, 2 Canadian provinces, and only a quarter of the most resilient places in this landscape are protected, and lots of roadway barriers in between. So our goal is really to, across this whole region, to protect and connect vital lands and waters, remove barriers, improve land management. And New York is a really critical link in the chain. We connect the Central Appalachians to the Northern Appalachians. So in pursuit of this larger vision, in recent years, the Nature Conservancy has added 3 new focal linkages in New York where we focus our connectivity work that sort of extend beyond the Staying Connected Initiative's footprint south, so to help connect to the Central Appalachians. So those original SCI linkages are in purple, and the additional Nature Conservancy linkages are in red. And all of these areas, these linkages are guided by science. They've undergone, varying levels of computer modeling and on-the-ground field research. Some on-the-ground field research has included wildlife tracking, roadkill assessments in some areas, wildlife camera monitoring, infrastructure assessments, assessing bridges and culverts essentially for their ability to pass wildlife. And because I mentioned the cameras, of course, I had to include, just some of my favorite pictures from monitoring over the years. I think these are all from the Black River Valley, and this my favorite curious bobcat. So just as I mentioned before, as no single group can address connectivity on this scale, really no single strategy is sufficient either. So, the partnership aims to bring together many different strategies, including improving transportation networks, outreach to private landowners, targeted land protection and land use planning. And here is just an image of what, that can all look like, sort of a simplified view of how it can all come together in one place on the ground. And I also want to emphasize that this work is not just about wildlife. It's about ensuring that people and wildlife can thrive together. When we have an intact landscape, we all benefit. So, some of the more obvious benefits include opportunities for recreation or hunting, fishing, along with safer roads for motorists. But intact landscapes also protect our water and our clean air, mitigate climate change, define our sense of place, which many of us call home. So I'm going to quickly run through each of these strategies and provide some examples of our work. So starting with transportation, we know roads create a number of problems for wildlife, even though we rely on them every day. They, can fragment habitat, serve as barriers to movement, and they can cause wildlife vehicle collisions. There are over 2 million collisions with large wildlife in the U.S. every year, and new estimates from federal highways are showing that cost of being equated to roughly $11 billion every year. We are working with DOTs on identifying and implementing wildlife crossings. And I'll just note, I think, when most people hear the term wildlife crossing, myself included, we often think of the big, exciting, very expensive overpasses that are becoming more common in places like out west, where, there are perhaps more limited opportunities for crossings or specific migration routes of certain species. But here in the Northeast, our landscape is more diffuse, and we're more often talking about our existing infrastructure. So our bridges and culverts at road stream crossings. We know wildlife often follow riparian corridors, and so finding ways to make those more suitable for wildlife to travel safely under the road, either through low-cost retrofits to existing structures or properly designing replacements as our structures age out. And overall studies show that these solutions are doable and effective, and can save lots of money in the long term, not only with less collisions, but often with more resilient infrastructure to climate change as well. The SEI partnership has mitigated over a dozen roadway barriers for wildlife. There's more and more compelling examples popping up all over. This is an example of a project our New Hampshire partners completed, replacing this undersized culvert, which was serving as a barrier for both fish and wildlife, and creating flooding issues, with this larger one that includes dry passage for wildlife, which, as you can see, was pretty quickly used by bear and others. Here is a salamander crossing that was installed in Moncton, Vermont by our partners. This is a dry underpass, and while it was designed for salamanders, it's used by a number of other species as well, including bobcat, and this bear who squeezed through. His head is right at the top of the structure here. And this is an example from New York of a retrofit of an existing structure. This area is in the Tug Hill to Adirondacks linkage, was identified as a wildlife crossing priority based on some field research and modeling. So while the existing culvert here was plenty big enough for wildlife to use, it has water in it year round and no dry passage for wildlife. And so, while the ideal solution here for wildlife would have been to replace this structure with a new, much larger one that could accommodate natural banks on either side, the structure itself was in good shape. It wasn't impeding aquatic connectivity or flooding. And so a replacement wasn't really warranted. And what we came up with instead was to add this shelf for small and medium-sized mammals to safely cross. This was a technology we borrowed from Montana DOT. So in this slide also shows, several different strategies and partners coming together. So the Nature Conservancy led the science and the monitoring. DOT installed the shelf. And the adjacent lands are protected by a conservation easement by a local land trust, the Adirondack Land Trust, really safeguarding investments in this site and ensuring that, we weren't installing a crossing to nowhere should the land on the other side become, condos in 5 years. So in addition to sort of those specific mitigation projects across the region, we're also working on various transportation planning pieces with our agency partners. The Northeast Transportation and Connectivity Project is one current effort the Nature Conservancy is leading across 8 northeastern states, where we're working on a couple of different things, mapping, to identify priority mitigation sites, providing Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act support to interested agencies to really leverage the recent influx of federal funding, and developing trainings and best practices. So I'll quickly run through each of these with some examples. So on the mapping front, this is a work in progress, but we are working to create some simple web maps for each of these states in partnerships with the DOTs that really brings together transportation and natural resource priorities, as these are usually the most realistic and fundable projects in the near term where we can meet multiple benefits and they're already on a DOT wish list, so to speak. So the maps are meant to be, user-driven, allowing one to really filter and prioritize as they choose, with the ultimate goal of narrowing down a massive list of potential bridges and culvert sites to ones that meet multiple ecological co-benefits. So for example, in New York, DOT provided us with a number of great data sets. These are all the culverts and bridges that are either in poor condition or are on a list of already planned projects. And you can start to narrow it down by overlaying, various natural resource priorities to see where you have the biggest impacts. So for example, this is what it looks like if we take that list and just filter it to areas within the Nature Conservancy's resilient and connected network data. So, these are areas that are likely to be more important for wildlife connectivity. You can overlay it with, let me just make sure it's advancing. We could also overlay it with other data sets, like this is from New York State Parks biodiversity data set. And you can see that brings the list down from over 5,000 sites to just 419 sites. We can narrow it again to filtering just to sites with that adjacent conserved land on one or both sides that we know is a really important part of the equation. For another example, you can look for co-benefits like places with no or reduced aquatic organism passage, as well as those that may be at risk for flooding. So you can sort of see we just went from 5,257 potential sites in need of attention to just 12 that might provide all of those ecological co-benefits. This is just kind of the first step in the process. Obviously field verification and some other crosswalking with partners would be useful afterwards. And like I said, it's a work in progress. I'm happy to share this with folks once it's completed. And this was just one example of how it might be used. So the second prong of our transportation planning work is providing that support to tap Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act funding for agencies that are interested. I think there are roughly like 18 new or expanded programs through IIJA that include wildlife connectivity provisions. The biggest one obviously including the new standalone $350 million wildlife crossing pilot program. So we've partnered with a number of state DOTs so far on proposals to this program, several of which have been successful so far. We have some more outstanding asks for this current round, which just closed 2 weeks ago, including one in New York. So, we're really hopeful that those will be successful. So moving on to the third prong of our transportation planning work, this is sort of focused on trainings and resources. We are developing a new online road ecology training video geared towards transportation professionals. This will be modeled off a successful training program that Vermont developed, which won a Federal Highways Award. Their agencies use it regularly. And they really attribute this training as the #1 most impactful thing they've done to advance transportation planning for connectivity in their state. And for years, Vermont has really kind of led the way for this work in the Northeast. So the purpose is to, build on and expand on that Vermont model and really enhance habitat connectivity awareness, appreciation, inspire some practical projects and creative thinking, facilitate expanded interagency planning and trainings. It will be a 60 to 90 minute probably online video. Broken into modules, featuring, the basic concepts of road ecology, what it is, why we should care, connectivity planning, prioritization, actual infrastructure solutions, monitoring, evaluation, partnerships, resources, etc. And so to collect new content for the training, we visited successful projects from all across the Northeast, sort of a whirlwind road tour, including these 3 that were featured in New York, the critter shelf that I mentioned before, a bridge replacement project that DOT had done that included wildlife passage at the southern edge of the Adirondacks, which was a really sort of creative approach that used an old bridge abutment for the wildlife shelf, which ended up saving them money as well. And then also a turtle crossing in southern New York. So we've now completed site visits and interviews in all of these states this summer, except Connecticut, one more to go, happening in a couple weeks. And we will then compile all the footage and package up the training to hopefully be complete by year end or so. It will be posted to the Nature Conservancy's YouTube channel, which can be linked to from any other platform. And we hope it'll be relevant to not only the state DOTs that have been really helping to create it, but also municipal highway departments, even private consultants and engineers, basically anyone working at the transportation and wildlife interface. And we also hope that it will inspire, subsequent trainings, like in-person trainings, the way that Vermont structures their program, for example. So this is sort of the first step in launching that effort. Okay, so that was all about transportation. Land protection is another key strategy for wildlife connectivity. And, the Nature Conservancy has a long history of protecting land, including some large and iconic projects. But, in recent years, we're thinking more and more about the often, smaller but critical habitat stepping stones in our linkages. Our linkages are places in New York that are typically more fragmented. They're a real patchwork of farms and forests and communities. Our local land trust partners are often best positioned to lead protection deals here. And so in 2021, we created a new grant program in New York called the Climate Resilience Grant Program to provide grants to local land trusts and municipalities to fund climate resilient projects that contribute to connectivity, really focused on our linkages in our core forests. So projects with this program can be for direct acquisition or for planning and capacity building. And really, with feedback from partners and applicants, the goal of the program was really to try to remove barriers and fund elements of projects that are often otherwise hard to fund, such as, for example, stewardship endowments for conservation easements. So since 2021, this grant program has contributed nearly $2 million to support partners in the permanent protection of nearly 11,000 acres of forests and wetlands and floodplains, and the program has now grown beyond New York. So the next round of funding, I believe, opens at the end of November with awards up to $50,000. So please do check out our website if you or partners are interested in that. In addition to outright land protection, we've also just engaged landowners, generally on the topic of wildlife connectivity. We had a project in the Adirondacks to Tug Hill linkage with partners at the Tug Hill Tomorrow Land Trust and the Tug Hill Commission, where we provided wildlife cameras to interested landowners to monitor wildlife on their properties, as well as conducted some ecological assessments and provided management recommendations to enhance wildlife habitat. We created a management recommendations guide for landowners, which is available on the Staying Connected Initiative website. And in many ways, the cameras and the assessments were really sort of served as a non-threatening introduction to this work, to get landowners interested and thinking about the importance of their lands in a bigger context, and hopefully creating a pipeline of interested landowners for future conservation, which can take time. So I know we had at least one conservation easement result from that initial engagement in the Black River Valley, which is held by our partner Tug Hill Tomorrow Land Trust. Let's see. The third and final strategy that I'll mention for enhancing habitat connectivity is one that we at the Nature Conservancy are not as directly involved in, but our partners often are, like the Tug Hill Commission. This is around land use planning. So, land use planning strategies can be really important in shaping how communities are addressing these issues at the local level, as well as coordinating across jurisdictions and really planning for new development. And so the purpose is to help make future development compatible with landscape connectivity and steering development away from critical wildlife movement areas and maybe to more appropriate places. So the assistance that the SCI partners provide includes, the where, helping to identify key places for different kinds of zoning and also the how, ways in which zoning and land use planning can be done to conserve these places. Whereas core habitat blocks often tend to be, uplands or wetlands where development may be difficult or prohibited, connecting features and habitat stepping stones are often located in our valleys, along rivers, areas more suitable for development where habitat fragmentation is more likely to occur. And these features can be subtle and easy to overlook in planning, yet they're critically important for conservation by, ensuring connectivity between these larger core habitat blocks. So efforts on land use planning really vary across the region, depending on local laws and organizing frameworks, and including those at the town and county and state level. Vermont's been very active with successfully engaging local towns around land use planning for connectivity. I know several groups in New York have been working on this too as part of a larger vision, and I'm sure there are lots that I'm not aware of. Like the Housatonic Valley Association and their Follow the Forest initiative that spans multiple towns and states in Eastern New York. The Tug Hill Commission that I mentioned earlier led some efforts in their region years ago, holding community values mapping exercises, which is what's pictured here. Essentially getting various community members and leaders together to look at maps and prioritize areas for various purposes, whether for recreational values, scenic, historic, other reasons, with a goal for identifying areas where conservation can protect many values, including wildlife connectivity. This led to several local towns incorporating wildlife connectivity language in their local land use plans. I think across the region, SCI partners have incorporated connectivity provisions into over 150 local land use plans. One thing I'll just mention, I know it's a topic that at this conference today, we're seeing land use planning becoming increasingly important as renewable energy development ramps up. In order to meet our state's really ambitious climate goals in New York, we'll need to dramatically scale up our renewable efforts like solar. And that's going to require balancing trade-offs and trying to ensure that critical areas still remain permeable. Our New York linkages in particular, like the Mohawk Valley, between the Catskills and the Adirondacks, the Black River Valley between Tug Hill and the Adirondacks are currently seeing quite a bit of solar development pressure. So I'll just note the Nature Conservancy and partners are launching a renewable siting effort in New York this year. We're participating in dialogues at the national level. There's currently no national guidelines on siting solar like there is for wind. Overall, this is a huge topic that we're really just scratching the surface of and are eager to learn more about, especially with respect to wildlife connectivity. There is sort of limited guidance to date on wildlife connectivity and solar beyond, properly siting this development. Most recommendations are about making, associated fencing permeable, for example. But it's clear that there will continue to be lots of competing pressures on our lands, and planning to do that appropriately will be critical. So the last thing I'll just mention is just the opportunity for this work to inform state planning efforts like the ones listed here. We're really pleased to see DEC increasingly thinking about connectivity considerations and thinking across borders for things like these plans, the open space plan currently underway, as well as planning for 30 by 30. And there are opportunities to prioritize this work in the state wildlife action plans that will be updated soon, and of course with state transportation plans. I'll just quickly note, in 2016, SCI partners were instrumental in getting this resolution on ecological connectivity adopted by the New England governors and Eastern Canadian premiers, committing to working together on connectivity. The exciting news on this front is that just last week they adopted a new resolution, essentially, recommitting to this earlier one, sort of to be determined what the implementation will look like. Unfortunately, New York was not part of that effort, as New York is not included in that governing body. But hopefully the recent interest and momentum will reaffirm its commitment and potential to expand to New York. So I've covered a lot, no doubt, probably not everything. Obviously connectivity is a really complex challenge requiring coordination across a number of different strategies and partners and scales. But also I think a really hopeful one, and that we all have a role to play. And there's never been more attention than there is now on this issue, along with funding and policy opportunities, and it's only growing. So with that, I'll end there, and happy to take any questions if we have time, Jennifer.
Thank you so much, Alyssa, for that presentation, for the summary of all the work you're doing. It's very interesting. One of the questions I see in the chat from Patricia, she's just asking about whether you think the traffic signs have any effect in protecting wildlife, for example, like turtle crossing.
Is it about signs in particular, or sorry, I'm looking at
Do you think signs have any effect in protection?
So signage, unfortunately, studies have shown that signage makes pretty little impact on driver behavior. I think, in places like out west where they're creating these new, live signs with animal detection systems that are new or flashing, they're showing to be more effective. But sort of the standard signs that we're used to in the Northeast, studies usually show that drivers get used to them. They have pretty little impact on driver behavior. But the actual crossing structures themselves have been effective at crossing species.
Okay, great. Just a reminder to everybody at 2:15, we'll have people from DEC, and I started talking about some of these open space plans, the 30 by 30, the 70 by 30 plan. So good timing there. Caroline from, I'm assuming from DEC, encourages everybody to stop over at the DEC booth in the Gather lobby during lunch or in the afternoon break to talk more about it. So with that, if there are no more questions for Alyssa, we'll break for lunch, 12 to 1. I believe there's a presentation during, am I wrong in saying that? Where's my people? Don't quote me. But yeah, 12 to 1 lunch break, and we'll be back 1 to 2:15. All right. Thanks, everyone. I'm gonna find out if we have that lunch break. I know we have a lunch break. I'm just trying to find out if we have presentation.
I just saw Samantha's question in the chat about the training. Please reach out to me. We're hoping it'll be done by year end, but it will eventually be posted to our official YouTube channel, the Nature Conservancy's YouTube channel. So should be able to search for it. But yeah, please do reach out if you want a more direct update in a few months.
Is that the same training you were talking about for Vermont? Wasn't there a Vermont? You were saying, was there like a highway super training? Is that what that was?
Yes, yeah. So we really modeled the creation of this new regional one off of Vermont's existing program that they developed several years ago, and they have been very successful with that. And they sort of use it as a standard practice now, like an onboarding tool for a lot of new agency folks within their DOT and some fish and wildlife people as well.